cold autumn night in western Japan, but we've got hot tunes and booze to warm the soul.
I'm all warmed up inside, Russ. I'm on fire. I'm ready to go.
Are you back on the booze?
I'm back on the booze. Last week, I know listeners were concerned that I was not feeling well. I was drinking tea. But this week, I had a few beers before today's podcast, and now I'm back on the Knob Creek single barrel bourbon. Here we go.
All right, in stereo.
Yeah, so I'm already well lubricated.
On that mic over there with the Knob Creek is Mike.
That's me, Mike, and you know what I like about lubricated liquor, and it makes you loquacious. I like the way liquor and loquacious both have a Q in them. It kind of makes them feel kind of related to me, kind of like they go together.
Liquor loquacious. That would be a good title to get sometime, if we can get one more word, yeah.
Oh, that could be good. Maybe that, yeah. Maybe we'll work that in this week. We'll see.
Hot loquacious licks and liquor.
Loquacious like licks. Oh, that could be good.
Loquacious licks. Let's write that down somewhere before we forget it.
Well, loquacious, we're the loquacious ones. They're giving the licks. I don't know.
Licks, that's right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a thought, though.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're feeling better, and
I feel amazing. Yeah.
I'm
back in full health, and no COVID on me. I can tell you that. Now I just dated the podcast. Like if someone listens to this 10 years from now, they're going to know that it was during this period.
Well, that's all right. No problem to have a little timestamp on things for episode 37 of Adult Music.
Of what? Adult music. Okay.
And what is adult music? Well, it's the podcast with music for the mature mind. We're here every week with at least 6 new releases of classical and jazz music, and sometimes something outside of those realms too, to stimulate your brain through active listening. And, well, what are we talking about? Well, you can find out in the episode description on whatever platform you're listening to us on, where you'll find links to all of the recordings on Spotify and Apple, the 2 most popular streaming services. However, we prefer Deezer for our regular listening, and we also have a full episode playlist on Deezer with all the recordings in one spot, and you'll find that at the top of the episode description, where you can also follow us on the podcast, Deezer Podcasts. Adult Music Podcast is the name there. Whatever platform you listen to us on, if you don't see the full description, you can come over to our host site where everything is easy to see and all the links are active, and that's Podbean, and just look for Adult Music on Podbean. Now, if you enjoy the podcast, please do follow or subscribe on whatever app or platform you're listening to us on. If you take a moment, give us a ranking, write a review. That will help us get listed in the ever-growing browsing category recommendations, and that helps us grow our audience. And if you'd like to contact us directly, if you have any comments or questions, we'd like to hear from you. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com.
Yes, there you go. And tonight, we have some really fantastic... This has been a fantastic listening week, hasn't it?
Yeah, we have more than usual. We actually have 8...
Well, it took a lot of... Well, 8...
8 albums worth of...
8 CDs. 8 albums. Yeah, 8 CDs worth of music. We had 2 kind of double albums this week. And I'll explain why in the classical region that is. And then I just picked 2 single CDs to butt together, which I often do in this.
And I had been organizing, I had a long list of growing jazz things I wanted to listen to, and then I just was sort of categorizing them, and I had, okay, look, I have all these recordings that are led by drummers, which doesn't happen a lot, and I didn't realize that one of them was a double album. And then I saw you had a double album. I said,
no problem for me. Well, I didn't have a double album. I had 2 albums I put together, actually.
Right.
As one thing. I'll explain why I did that when we get to it. But
But anyway, it was worthwhile listening to everything.
It was. And, I just wish we had more like free time during the week, because we have day jobs. We're kind of hoping to make this our permanent employment one day.
That's right.
That would be nice, but we have to build up the podcast, get a few more listeners, actually a lot more listeners.
Yeah,
but
corporate sponsorships would be good.
Corporate sponsorships would help.
What do we got? I've got...
Or maybe even a rich donor. If you're out there, send us an email and tell us you want to send us a lot of money.
Equipment. I've got AKG, Audio Technica. We've got all these things that could be sponsored. Right. Give my sexy radio voice a little backing.
And my brother likes your sexy radio voice.
Oh.
My family doesn't like my voice at all. They just kind of don't. They don't like to talk about it. I suspect most listeners don't either, but that's okay.
I can see the family thing.
I will defiantly go on.
I'm glad your brother likes my sexy voice.
He does
for him.
Yeah,
and all the ladies out there too, of course, and anyone else who likes it. So,
Oh boy.
Hey, we're going to go on a voyage, aren't we, to start things out?
All right, so we're going to start out, I guess, Eric, because you said that magic word, Adriatic voyage, a voyage on the Adriatic Sea. This is our first classical recording. So, okay.
Is that a reed boat? Do you need a reed boat to go on the Adriatic Sea? Or?
Yeah, listeners, we're now talking about the music. We're not like...
Yes,
we're not chatting anymore.
Jumped into that, yeah.
We just really jumped into that unexpectedly. Okay, yeah, our first album is called Adriatic. We're starting with classical music, the Baroque era, Adriatic Voyage, 17th-century music from Venice to Dalmatia.
And is that where those dogs came from? Or
I guess so.
Yeah,
I guess that's why the Dalmatians. I guess they would be, right? They were probably bred there. Some listener, if you're out there and you can write us a note and let us know. Yeah. Write to our email though. Don't if you just leave a comment, we probably won't see it because we can't get to all these sites. Anyway,
are Dalmatians on Spotify?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a bad pun. Anyway, keep going.
Oh man, I didn't even think of that. God, Dalmatians, Spotify. That's all.
There you go.
Oh, now there are spots before my eyes.
Anyway, keep going.
All right, no more, please.
No more.
Okay,
stop it.
All right. Anyway, where is Dalmatia anyway? Do you know?
It's across the Adriatic Sea.
Somewhere, yeah. Was it like Croatia or
it's
Serbia or something like that?
It's exactly. I did know, but then I forgot.
That's pretty much my situation with literally everything. I used to know, but I forgot.
Well, I guess it's Croatia, yeah. Now that I think about it,
yeah, the old Yugoslavia, basically.
Yeah. I don't know where it was at the time of this recording.
Was composed, okay, yeah, we're talking about like the, I guess the 1700s here, or the 1600s. This would be the 1600s. Yeah, the early Baroque era. Okay, the performers here are the Marion Consort, directed by Rory McCleery, and the Illyria Consort. Oh, I like that name, Illyria. Okay, Bojan Čičić is the director.
There's a lot of extra symbols in that name.
Right, there are. It's a CH in English. It's like a CH. I don't know exactly what it is, but and this is on the Delphian label, the Edinburgh-based Delphian label in Scotland. They've been putting out a lot of really good stuff lately, and this is one of them, I have to say. This is an album of music that you would have come across if you were traveling on the Adriatic Sea from Venice into what is now Croatia, or down into the eastern shore. Okay, across from Venice, and the booklet note goes into a long description of one particular voyage that was taken by a political. Oh man, I can't remember off the top of my head now. What do you call these political guys who they're like represent your government? They're an ambassador. Okay, I guess. Yeah, to these other what were in countries then. One of the things we need to remember about when we're talking about the Baroque era is this whole idea of nationalism, that you had a nation and you belonged to the soil, really didn't exist. You were just under the rule of some king, or emperor or whoever it was, some lord or something. And it didn't really matter what your, kind of, I don't want to say racial, but I can't think of another word at the moment.
Ethnic
your racial background was. You were just wherever you were. Yeah. It was more kind of like you belong to this ruler rather than to this land. Like democracy we tend to belong more to the land or something like that if we're in that situation. Anyway, in this case, so it's sort of like music you would have heard if you were on this voyage that you would have come across. This album, I should mention right away, is really beautifully recorded. It was just stunning. The voices are all clearly discernible through the textures. And what we hear on the record isn't all written down. It's sort of realized, okay, because Baroque era music was kind of, you would get a melody and you'd get chords, and the continuo would have to be improvised by the players. Yeah, it's all sketched, basically. And it has to be recreated by the musician. So it's not quite improvisation like you'd get in jazz, but again, it's not written out, so you're not really remembering anything. You have to sort of interpret. So all these records tend to sound really different, and this one does too.
Yeah, and it's got these period instruments too.
Yeah, and some of those period instruments are instruments we don't really hear very often, are they? Like cornets and sackbuts.
Yeah, dulcian.
The and the dulcian too, which is a kind of bassoon. It's
looks like you might be able to smoke some buds or something in it. I don't know.
Oh yeah, dulcian. I like the name better. I don't know.
I like it too. Yeah.
I don't. The thing is, I made this joke in my novel, Extreme Music. Bassoon kind of sounds like a buffoon, So I don't. I think the dulcian name. I think I like that better. It does sound very old. But dolce, like in Latin, dolce is like, or in Italian is sweet. So dulcian would be a sweet sound, I guess. Anyway, let's start talking about the music on this album. These are all composers that I've never heard of before, and I have on my shelf right here in my house the book Italian Baroque Masters, and none of these people are in it. At least I don't remember them being in it. I've read it from cover to cover back when I was doing my master's degree.
You know why? Because it says music from Venice to Dalmatia.
Yeah.
But I guess it wasn't a round trip.
They went one way.
They went one way, and that's where they never heard from again. So.
I imagine they returned. I guess, yeah. Well, they were wherever they were, and they were both Italian and other. I guess I don't know. I guess they were kind of
there's
Slovak.
some names here that don't look quite Italian to me.
Yeah. We'll talk about those when we get to them. In fact, the first one, Francesco Usber. Usber. So he sounds like he had parents from both places, maybe. This album, it's a pretty interesting mix of music to this sacred music, this secular music, this instrumental music, this vocal music. It really keeps you, it gives you the ear a variety of things to stay interested in. So that's another good thing about it.
Yeah, there's a cappella and everything. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. Okay, let's go through this, not necessarily track by track, but we'll go through the whole album. The first work, Francesco Usber, we hear him on the first track, and it's an Ave Maria, a mournful player in this case. This is sung by a choir and strings without vibrato. We're very much in this Baroque period performance type of sound world. Okay, it really puts us in the, I want to say it puts us in the period, but to be honest, we really don't know what these ensembles sounded like, but we do imagine they didn't use vibrato. That's really a later development in music. Vibrato is like kind of moving your finger on the strings of the violin, so that it makes like a sort of almost vibrating sound, as opposed to just like a long kind of whining sound, I guess. I don't know. There's a bit of counterpoint in this piece, in this particular work. I shouldn't call it a piece, it's only one movement. The beginning is sung chords. There are wind instruments in there, and cornets and sackbuts, and a dulcian. So we hear them all right away. Now, I always think about sackbuts as being this really like loud, nasally, and annoying instruments, but that's not the case here. They're really mixed in very well with the ensemble. You do notice them, of course, but I would hate to have a neighbor that played the sack butt. I would tell you that.
Yeah, this is like the image just from the modern English, sack and butt. It just doesn't. I play the sack butt.
Yeah. They'd have to change the name today if it was still popular. They wouldn't allow that, I think,
But
okay,
and then we have they do cut through though. You'll notice because without vibrato, the voice blend and the movement of the voice is so smooth. And these period instruments, the wind instruments, have quite an edge to them, and so they do carry and cut through. You may have heard these before on different recordings, but in combination with vocals, they do have an edge of tone that makes them sort of pierce through on the recording and make you take attention to them. I noticed that right away on the first track. That was something that really excited me, really even back in the 1980s when the whole period instruments revival thing was coming around. Everything had a unique voice. It kind of sounded like, I guess, democracy, you could say. It's like everything was unique, but sort of blending together into a whole. Anyway, on we go. Gabriele Usber, I guess Francesco's brother. We don't really know. Didn't say anything about it in the notes. We have an instrumental work here right away. So there's no vocal. This is a pretty chirpy work for strings and winds. And winds being sackbuts, cornets, and the dulcian again. There's also a wood organ in there, which is more quieter than a big church organ, providing continuo. There are lots of changes in the rhythmic patterns to hold the interest in, as in the Stilus Fantasticus album that we talked about a few weeks back. So this would be like an early Baroque era. This is before the time when you can really write an extended work with the advanced understanding of harmony that came later. So they would, composers would vary the rhythms and the textures of sections of their works to keep interest. The cornetti part in here is just fabulous too. It's really... Really well played. Yeah. There's some very good ensemble playing here. In fact, everybody's really excellent. Okay, next we get to another Italian composer, Gabriele Puliti, En Dialectus Meus, which means my beloved. All right, this is from the Song of Songs in the Bible, and this is sung by the chorus. Very erotic lyrics, by the way. This is always something that's interested me. I've read things about the Song of Songs in the Bible saying that, it's a hymn to the love of God, but it's not. It's very erotic. It's about some ruler who wants to get it on with his one of his slave girls, I guess, someone who works outside. Anyway, not appropriate for today's audiences, but it's in the Bible, so we kind of. Sounds like adult music to me. Try to cover it up. It is indeed adult music. Yes. This is the way we like it. Anyway. Track 4, Gabriele Puliti again. Now, this is really interesting because we just heard this En Dialectus Meus from the Song of Songs where the singer is singing about his desire for this woman. And then in the next piece, we have a piece called Dona Ingrata. First of all, it's not in Latin. It's in the vernacular Italian, so the language of the people, for solo voice and accompaniment. And this one is mostly a guitar-like instrument, which I guess is the theorbo. Yeah. It sounds pretty high and gentle for the theorbo, though. I didn't know the theorbo can do that. And I think there's a little programming joke here because Arise My Love and Calm, now we're hearing, it was the previous track, and now we're hearing Ungrateful Woman, so I'm guessing the tryst in track 3 didn't go so well. Does it, as it often doesn't, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of them don't, and we don't really hear about that in songs very often. Or the singer now has his eyes on someone else, he kind of, done with her. Let's get let's go for this other woman here. That could be happening too. Back to the music though. This is a nice piece with a series of verses commented on by the changing instruments at the end. It's inventively arranged by the ensemble. Okay, I just want to mention first of all, we're making jokes about this, but this is all very straight. I think there are little jokes in the program, but the music is very much what it is. It's very kind of, it's not a funny album by any means.
No.
Yeah. Okay. It's just music of the period. Okay, next we get 3 pieces by a composer named Vincenz Jelic. Okay, now this has tracks 5, 6, and 7. The tracks 5 and 7 are both vocal works, and they're both religious as well. And the middle movement is an instrumental music, so you can call this a Jelic sandwich. Oh, man. Just the jokes just don't stop coming with this record, do they? Can we start this podcast over?
we should, yeah.
Maybe we should. I don't know. Let me mention, though, I really liked this album a lot, even though thinking of all these things. But I think the ensemble does have a sense of humor in the programming, even though they're playing the music very seriously. Okay, so I think there is that. It's meant to raise a smile. Okay, the first piece, Bona Jesu, which means good Jesus. This harmonic singing here for a single melody. No counterpoint on this one, so the words are very easy to hear. There's a lot of variety. I should also point out, by this point, we're only on track 5, but we've heard a lot of variety so far. We've heard religious music, we've heard instrumental music, and we've heard a secular tune, Dona Ingrata, the previous track. So this is really interesting programming, and it's also very clever as well, as we've pointed out in our little jokes.
Yeah, there's a lot of variety, and then especially some of the tunes, when the organ comes in, it's completely different sort of, weight to the tunes
right.
that this old style organ comes in. And then you've got some a cappella things mixed in here. You've got the strings, and then you've got the interesting period wind instruments. So every tune has a really kind of unique timbre collection of things, and a different topic, whether it's secular or religious. So within this period, you're also experiencing a lot of variety of compositional ideas as well as instrumentation. So yeah, it's very, very interesting.
Yeah. By the way, in this, the track 5, the Bona Jesu by Vincenz Jelic, at the end there's an Alleluia. All these sort of pieces end with an Alleluia, and I just love the rhythmic bounce that the Alleluia has here, and really in all early Baroque works when they set church music. I really love it. So give that a special listen if you actually go to these tracks. Okay, the middle movement, Ricercar 3, I guess. 3. Okay, this is the instrumental. This is the meat in the Jelic sandwich. It's pretty slow and drawn out notes, and it's a bit sad. And then we end with Exultate Deo, which is a rejoicing God, a very joyous piece, sung by a solo bass. Again, more variety. Okay, we've been hearing a lot of choral singing, and here we hear a solo bass voice. Okay, track 8, Giulio Schiavetto, whose name means little slave. Schiavetto, can you imagine that?
Wow.
Can you imagine if that was like an English name? Little slave? Now batting for the Dodgers, number 18, Giulio Little Slave. Oh, I don't know, but anyway, that's what it means. Oh. Anyway, the work is Ave Maria. It's a polyphonic work, very different than the solo bass work that preceded it, for all the voices with string accompaniment.
This is a gorgeous one, yeah.
It is pretty.
I really
like
this one.
Yeah, Giulio Schiavetto. He may be a little slave, but he's a great composer. Anyway.
Nice voice movement in this one.
All right. Track 9, Bartolomeo Sorte, I Superbi Colossi. This is a more scattered homophonic work for choir. It's more, it's like the text is about how awesome its dedicatee is.
Yeah.
I always love these pieces because I tend to try to forget about the dedicatee and think of that it's being sung to me. Which makes it even more appealing still, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. This would be good work to start the day with. You feel good about yourself. This is the piece that mentions, Giacomo Soranzo is mentioned in this piece, and he was the diplomat. That was the word I was looking for earlier. The diplomat who was traveling into what are currently Croatian lands to get some sort of a deal with Venice. Okay, next we have 3 works by Ioannis Lukacic de Sebenico. The first one is a religious work, Panis Angelicus, the Bread of Angels. Now, people might recognize this title from the famous César Franck work that gets played at Christmas all the time. I still have memories of Pavarotti singing this on his O Holy Night album. This is a different setting, of course. It's got mild polyphony in it, sung by the choir. By the way, Charles Gounod set the really famous version of this that you know. This is charming and it's easy to follow the vocals. I really like this a lot. The next work, Quam pulchra est, How Beautiful You Are. Also from the Song of Songs. I guess you could have guessed that. And this one's for all the vocalists. They sing together for the chorus, Quam pulchra est, and each gets a solo in the verses. And then we have the last Sabetico work, Siku Cedrus. This is also rather slow and exalted sounding, and there's some nice melisma from the solo soprano.
This is a standout vocal track on the album for me.
She's good, this soprano.
Yeah, the lyrics...
And she sings solo, by the way.
Well, you sent me the notes, and
all right.
So the lyrics are very beautiful, and it's a soaring female vocal, and she does utilize a kind of vibrato in some places, but it's very limited and controlled with the straight tone. It's really beautiful voice control and a great composition, and she makes the best of it. This one really caught my attention.
Yeah, track 12, everybody, if you want to sample that. Siku Cedrus by Ioannis Lukacic des Sebenico. Okay, next we have 5 compositions by Tommaso Chakino. And this would be a triple-decker sandwich, I guess, if you want to keep with that metaphor.
Yeah.
The first piece is Surge Propera, which is from the Song of Songs in the Bible again. Okay, this particular work, let me see. Okay, there are 2 vocal works that encase 3 sonatas in this triple-decker sandwich, let's say. Okay, so Surge Propera, this is for the choir, and they all sing the chorus, and they're all paired off in the verses. This is really pretty because you hear all of the singers in the choruses, but then you'll hear them duetting in each of the verses in different combinations. It's really nicely executed. Really interesting colors in this. Vocal colors, timbres, shall we say. Track 14, Tommaso Chakino. This is a sonata for violin solo with continuo. In this case, it's the theorbo, which is like a gigantic guitar type instrument. And the piece ends with solo organ. Track 15 is Sonata 7. Winds are heard in this one. And it sounds like a cornet is the solo instrument. And these work like the Stilus Fantasticus works, where the rhythm keeps changing in each section to kind of indicate that the section has changed. Track 16, Sonata 8. This, I guess accurately, I would say Sonata 8, but that would be 8. This sounds like more like a pastoral melody with squarer melodies in it. Okay, pastoral melodies tend to be, there's nothing really tricky about them. They're usually pretty simple. All right, and then we get another vocal work. This is the bread after this triple-decker sandwich. Alvivo Soul. It's a lightly scored love song sung in duet by soprano and bass. Very pretty. And finally, it's almost like this entire program is like a gigantic
another
big
sandwich.
Dagwood sandwich. Because we end with the composer we began with. This is only the second piece we're hearing by him, Francesco Usber. And this is called Battaglia per sonar e cantar a 8, 8 voices. This is a religious song with brass as military-sounding fanfares. The singers each get a solo section and sing together at the end. So this is a really good album. By the way, I thought of this as like an evening album, a good way to end the day. It's got an early evening feel to it. And the programming is very clever and a little comical. I think this ensemble, these 2 ensembles, have a bit of a sense of humor. You don't really hear that in the music. The works are all pretty serious, and they're all very seriously and very beautifully performed and recorded. Anyway, highly recommended, and it's a little unusual too. The programming is excellent. The instrumental ensembles, the sounds that you hear, the instruments are all rather different than your average run-of-the-mill Baroque recording. This is really something unique, and I would recommend you hear it.
Yeah, interesting and unique instrumentation, period instruments. The tone of the instruments will catch your ear. The cornetti playing is really good. There's also tenor cornetti, cornetto, I guess, on the last track too. Is a little bit different tone to it. So the period instruments sound great. The vocals are wonderfully blended, and I like you've got a range of voices, like this soprano and bass together is a nice combination. And yeah, the other a cappella works are really appealing and attention catching. I listened to this several times, and I'm going to go back and listen again.
I probably will too. Yeah, well worth your time.
Nice recording.
Put it on at dusk. It's perfect for that. It just feels like that sort of album. I really like to unwind to this at the end of the day. I'll just have to put this on again. All right, highly recommended. Adriatic Voyage, everyone. Okay, next. This is my so-called double album. It's actually not a double album. It's two separate albums that were both released this year. Okay, Jurgis. Now, I didn't get a pronunciation for his name. I did look for one. So forgive me, you Lithuanian listeners, if I get this wrong. He's a very famous composer from Lithuania, but we don't really know him. The rest of us don't really know him, so he's kind of like I guess you can call him a known unknown, as you can say, as Donald Rumsfeld said back in the day. Oh, what a life we've led, huh? Anyway, Jurgis Karnavičius. He was Lithuanian, and he lived from 1884 to 1941. So that would make him the modernist era. Now, I noticed he died during the Second World War, but I couldn't get any information about his death. Did he die as a result of the war, or what happened? He was fairly young. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe he's in his 60s, I guess.
That's starting to feel young.
50s? Yeah, starting to feel young. Yeah, we're getting older here. We're almost there. Anyway, what we're hearing, we have two CDs here. The first one, or two albums. The first one is String Quartets 1 and 2, and the second one is the recently released String Quartets 3 and 4. Now, I did some research on this. Research. I looked it up on the internet. That's not research. Okay. I hate it when people say that. Oh, you should do so. I did some research. You looked something up on the internet. That doesn't count.
Did you go to the archives in Lithuania?
I didn't go to the archives in Lithuania for this.
Oh.
Anyway.
Too bad.
Yeah, it would have been nice, but could have met some nice Lithuanian people on the way, too. Anyway. The 4-string quartets, my looking this up on the internet informed me that the 4-string quartets are really all of the string quartets of Karnavičius. He only wrote 4. So we've heard all 4 of them, and I've heard his name because I met a Lithuanian woman years ago, and she told me about him because I was really into music, and she mentioned, and I'm one of these idiots who ask people, oh, who would be your composer, your country's greatest composer? And she mentioned him. And so apparently Lithuanian people know him very well.
When I think of this name, I think of carnivore and delicious and carnivalicious. And I kind of like it because
Carnivalicious would be a great album name. Boy. Yeah, or maybe a good band name.
It reminds me of barbecue. So
the music didn't remind me of barbecue, though. I have to say,
not quite.
It's very different. Yeah, right. Anyway, so we do hear all 4 string quartets by Karnavičius. These are performed by the Vilnius String Quartet, and they're on the Ondine label, one of my favorite labels, actually. They are Finnish, and one of the reasons they're my favorite labels is because they release a lot of Finnish music, which I believe is some of the best music, the best classical music being composed today. So I'm always happy. I'm always kind of looking into the Ondine new releases to see what's coming out. Incidentally, we will have a contemporary composer on that label next, but we'll get to that when we do. Anyway, Karnavičius, one of the reasons you haven't heard of him is because he's not a modernist. He followed, I guess, what you call a moderate aesthetic. There's a bit of late romanticism to his style, but it's not quite romantic either. He does kind of go back to even the Mozart era. Like there are a lot of classical elements in this, or should we say Wranitzky? We call it the Wranitzky era because he was very classical as well.
I felt the first two were having a lot of folk influences, and to me, kind of a Brahmsian sort of impact on them. Whereas the 3 and 4,
they're a little more out there,
a little bit more, especially in the harmony, a little bit more modern. But
right, I'd pretty much agree with that. I'd say his teacher was Maximilian Steinberg, who was a disciple of Rimsky-Korsakov. Okay, so that'll tell you what you need to know. He's a disciple of Rimsky-Korsakov, and he's also a nurturer of traditions. So you're going to hear a lot of folky melodies, especially in the first string quartet. By the way, you know who else took lessons from Rimsky-Korsakov was Stravinsky, and Rimsky-Korsakov was not pleased with the music that Stravinsky wrote, but it didn't matter. Stravinsky went on to become one of the great composers of the 20th century. Karnavičius did not go the way of Stravinsky. He remained sort of fairly conservative, let's say, and so his music sort of fell by the wayside. But that doesn't mean it's not good. It's just, especially now when we hear this, now that all these modernist wars and have faded away, we can really appreciate this music for what it is, like his personal statements about how he saw his world. All right, the first string quartet, Opus 1, so this is the first work he ever wrote, I guess, or ever published. All right, when we say, by the way, anyone who doesn't know this, opus number, whenever you see OP, period, it means opus. Opus means the order that works were published, not the order they were composed in. Okay, this is kind of important to understand. Often, they can be composed and then published in that order, but the opus number specifically names the order the works were published in. Okay, with Beethoven, this becomes a big mess because there are some early Beethoven works that have high opus numbers that they were published later than he wrote them. Enough of Beethoven. Anyway, string quartet number 1. This was composed when Karnavičius graduated from the St. Petersburg Conservatory in 1913, and it wasn't performed until 1916. At that time, Karnavičius was at the front, fighting in World War I, fighting the Hungarians and the Germans. I'm not really sure how the Hungarians figure in that, but people from the region will certainly know. He was taken prisoner, and he was not, as a result, was not present at the first performance. I do feel for him.
Yeah, it's too bad.
Yeah, this work is very traditional in its...
Except the movements are so long, he could have almost escaped and come back in time.
Right? He probably could have. That's true. But they're very traditional in the way they're set up. They're set up in an almost classical form. The first movement is very much a sonata. So it has 2 themes, connected by a bridge. There's a cadence. There's a middle development section. And then there's a recapitulation section where the 2 themes at the end repeat. So it's very easy to follow if you understand what a sonata is. If you don't understand what a sonata is, you should look to Robert Greenberg's course, How to Listen to and Understand Great Music on the Great Courses. He'll explain it all to you. I could do it too. Or, you know who else did that is Wynton Marsalis actually explained this too. Somewhere on the internet. So you can look for that. Sonata. Look it up on YouTube or something. Anyway, first movement, Allegro Moderato. It's catchy and beautiful. This is a really beautiful work. It's very appealing to the ears. The opening theme sounds sort of like a folk dance. It really did put me in mind of that because it has like a rhythm to it, and it's pretty simple. It's easy to remember, which is important in a movement that's 11 minutes long. You have to remember the themes, right? So there's a sense of tradition in the movement. folk dances from this era, when I think of them, I think of Bartók, but this is nowhere near as adventurous as a Bartók kind of theme. It's fairly conservative, actually. And I hate to use the word conservative for anything that was connected to Russia or like Lithuania, Latvia, these nations close to Russia, because they were in a different situation than the Western world was. So music sort of developed differently there. Not a bad thing. This is a pretty romantic work, and it's in traditional harmony. The movement is in traditional sonata form. There are two themes in different keys that developed in the middle section, and they're clearly delineated, so they don't fade one into the other, so that you kind of wonder where the separation is. It's almost like this work almost has classical lines, like a work by Mozart or Haydn would have. We only hear the two themes in the exposition section once. In the classical era, they would have been repeated so that you remember them. The development begins at about 3 minutes and 50 seconds if you're keeping score and you want to follow along. The embellished recapitulation begins after the 6-minute mark, and there's a coda, which means tail, and the last 2 minutes, which is sort of concluding music. It's actually new material. Very beautiful, structurally satisfying, easy on the ear. A great place to start. The second movement, Allegro Moderato Allegro. So this comes across as a sort of scherzo with its ABA structure. A scherzo this is what Beethoven substituted in place of the traditional minuet and trio. These aren't really dancey, so I'm calling them a scherzo. There's an energetic, jumpy first theme with a contrasting middle section. And there's an ABA within the big ABA section, okay, followed by the moderato middle section again. After a minute and 30 seconds, there's a legato, very slow section that has a very longing quality to it. And this goes on until about the 4 minute and 45 second mark, where the opening allegro repeats. There's a brief closing coda, again, very traditionally classical. The third movement, Andante, these are often the meat of these sort of works. It's very traditional and song-like. My New York accent came out there. Song. It's a song. Song-like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Traditional and song-like opening melody in the violin, harmonized by the second violin, I think. And the rest of the parts fill in from top to bottom, which I always enjoy hearing. That's a really nice approach. There's a bit of contrapuntal writing between the two violins and the viola and cello. It morphs into brief question and answer patterns where one instrument will end the phrase of the other. Really gorgeous writing in this movement. I liked it a lot. The music speeds up as it goes and gets more urgent and tense. It hits a peak and then quiets down suddenly after the 4 minute mark. Now that's going to be kind of a technique that Karnavičius is going to use very often, especially in the next three quartets, and we're hearing it really for the first time here. It builds until the end. I enjoyed hearing the separate voices with the melody here. Very clear writing. The fourth movement, Allegro, has a dance-like folky melody in the opening, and this movement sort of works like a rondo, so that opening dancey melody keeps coming back after these more cerebral sort of sections that interrupt it. The third time the theme comes back, it's introduced as a fugue. It's a little departure from tradition here, with instruments entering one by one, and then reaches its normal profile. Kind of interesting technique there. There's still a minor feeling to this, but the relative weightlessness of the rhythms makes the piece lighten up, and we end with a sense of familiarity and lack of fear of the dark. I feel like Karnavičius, this is a very minor sounding piece. There's a lot of darkness in it. And at the end of this piece, he doesn't dispel the dark, but he's gotten us to live with it, sort of. And that's really, I feel like, what this piece is about. It's like we're dancing with our fear. Form emphatic chords played in unison end the piece. And I liked it. It was inventive, very easy to follow, and it's a beautiful, clear recording, by the way. We're really hitting it big on recording quality this week, aren't we?
Yeah, everything sounds really well recorded. The first album is phenomenal, and this one is good too. I agree.
3 jazz albums are as well. We'll get to those when we get there, though.
This one, as a composer I hadn't heard before, I thought as a initiation it was quite attractive. It's easily approachable. It's mercurial, I believe all of these are more and more as we go on through them.
More and more, exactly.
He changes up the mood and key and everything quite easily, but they're in familiar structures, so there's always something to hold on to that makes them easily approachable for something from this time period as not being true modernist, I guess. And as you say, I like how after all of the changes that you go through in these various structures, the fourth movement in this one ends with this kind of sonority that sort of brings you back to a steady bass with some kind of gravitas at the ending. And I thought it was a nice way to end this. But something from this time period, but it hints at structures that are traditional going back to classical music, so you won't feel alienated or left out as far as structure and compositional techniques.
Yeah, in fact, in that first string quartet, hints is like, I wouldn't say it even hints at it. It really just follows. It basically follows that. Yeah. Now, classical, he'll start kind of, he'll sort of hang his material in the next 3 quartets on those sort of structures, but he'll sort of break them apart more and more as they go. Yeah. And in fact, I think string quartet number 2, which is the second work on the first album that we're talking about and the last one on this album, written in 1917, this is his opus 6, gets a little bit further away from tradition, and this will happen in the third and fourth quartets even more so. We're starting to hear more and more who Karnavičius is starting with the second quartet, because I started hearing certain sort of techniques that he used over and over again in those next 3 works. This particular piece was the second string quartet. This is on the album String Quartets 1 and 2. This was written while Karnavičius was in captivity during the war. So he stayed in captivity until the end of the war, I guess. The booklet, by the way, for this album says there's a special finesse to the sound in this work. I don't know. It just sounds like he's developing his style to me. There are a lot of contrasts and drama, which the booklet mentions. Karnavičius didn't get to hear this piece performed in St. Petersburg in 1923, but that's like 6 years after it was written. It may have been performed in the camp he was imprisoned in. Concerts were held often there. We know the Messiaen story, right? About the quartet for the end of time was performed in a prisoner of war camp. These don't, they sound like there's a lot of hardship, but there was art going on there, which is at least quasi-humane, I would think, Yeah, different times, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, this particular quartet is a pretty big work. It's a 4-movement work. The first 3 movements clock in at 10 minutes or more, and the last is almost 10 minutes. So it's a lot of listening to do. All right, the first movement, again, it's a sonata, but I didn't realize this at first. It's labeled Allegro Moderato to Allegro Moderato, so it has a very long, dark, mournful opening. This is kind of an introduction before the main themes are introduced, and it starts in the cello and viola. The violas expand the theme gains life and rises, and this kind of rising quality is something that we'll hear a lot in the next 2 quartets as well. It seems to be some sort of psychological thing with Karnavičius, how he communicates what he wants to communicate musically. There are a lot of stops and starts. Again, a technique that he's going to use a lot is the mood suddenly changes. The music will just stop and then resume in some other direction. This is a Karnavičius technique that he will use often. The moods range from despair to anxiety. So that's not happy music here. It's pretty dark. It's all minor key with fleeting glimpses of major light. We do get a little, it's kind of like looking through like the slats of a blind or something like that, covering a window, and you get a little bit of sunlight in there, but it's mostly dark. Okay, there's a longer, more melodic theme emerges after the 4-minute mark, and this is really where I think the sonata part opens. It's not exactly clear, but the sonata movement starts about here. I noticed this was a sonata only when I started hearing those themes again at the end. It was a sort of hard to follow because he's pretty inventive with the form here. There are a lot of mood changes and a lot of these pauses as the movement goes on. Certain harmonizations are very moving, make the music really moving, and the moods are very fleeting as well. So it was kind of hard to concentrate on the thematic material. It just kind of comes and just sort of evaporates and goes on to something else. But this is in a sonata form. There is a coda, by the way, right at the very end. It's very short, only about a minute long. Second movement, allegretto, sostenuto allegretto. Just that marking tells you that this is sort of a minuet and trio type movement. In this case, I would say scherzo. Scherzo, by the way, means joke, and the joke was on the minuet and trio form. It was kind of like it's mocking that form in a way when it started anyway. So it works like a traditional scherzo. The first section is fast and folk-like with simple, memorable melody, and it gets a bit histrionic as it rushes along. The B section starts, I wrote this down exactly, 3 minutes and 27 seconds. You can start the B section or follow along exactly if you're listening on digital media. There's a big pause to prepare you for it. It's easy to spot. And the B section is slow and dusky, kind of sad, with mutes on the instruments. They're very quiet. The main theme returns at 5 minutes 53 seconds with some changes. And this is a surprisingly long movement for the form it takes. Minuets are usually pretty short, but this takes 10 minutes to play out. The repeat of section A should be labeled A1 in this case because it's got fast folk-like theme, but it's got some pauses and musical commentary scattered between, so it sort of expands on what we heard the first time. There's lots of unexpected stuff which make this movement move out of this traditional kind of form a bit. And that's reassuring because it means that this composer is kind of working with our expectations or against them. And that's always interesting. The Andante Movement, a dark theme again. This is a pretty dark piece, really. In the cello or viola, I'm not really sure, but it might be the viola. We hear melodic themes with figuration around them that stop and give way to similar new themes. The movement sounds hesitant, and the pausing that we heard so much in the first movement seems to be integral to the whole piece because we're hearing it a lot in this movement. This movement also seems to be climbing towards something. I mentioned earlier that Karnavičius music tends to rise towards something and it sounds more and more positive, and then it'll sort of like go down and as sort of despair sets in again. And then there'll be a pause and some quiet, despairing music. This kind of felt like to me the rising themes sounded like like vines growing up a surface of a wall or something like that. I feel like it was reaching for something higher. The fourth movement is labeled Allegro, and it has this ghostly floating theme in 3. I think of if you think of Beethoven's Tempest Sonata, like the last movement of that, da-da-da-da, da-da-da, it has that kind of floaty sort of feeling to it. And it gains in tension and rains down the scale when it reaches its peak. And there's a second slow theme to this too. This is also going to be something that we're going to hear a lot in the next 2 quartets as well. So Karnavičius has apparently had this sort of 3/4 rhythm and this sort of floating quality of the melody has some kind of meaning to him. So maybe I imagine maybe something like escape or something like that. Anyway, that's the end of the first CD. Now, that one, the 2 works I first worked with are on one album, and that was released in March this year, so it was a long time ago. The String Quartets 3 and 4 were released more recently, I think around September. And this particular one starts with String Quartet number 3, of course, written in 1922. This is his Opus 10. The 2 works on this album, String Quartets 3 and 4, were composed in St. Petersburg, which is already known as Petrograd by then, and it was Leningrad when the 4th String Quartet was written. That must be confusing, huh? Mm. The 3rd
No place
quartet,
like home.
No place like home, yeah. as long as you know what to call home.
Where it is.
Yeah. The third quartet is dedicated to the memory of Antonio Stradivari, of all people, the great 17th century or late 17th or early 18th century violin maker from Cremona, Italy, whose Stradivarius violins are very famous around the world. I have no idea why he would dedicate this work to this violin maker. It doesn't really sound... It has, I guess, a few Baroque elements in it, but it's really not a Baroque work. It's fairly dark, again. Both of these works are, but they're all highly listenable. I don't want to turn the listeners off and say, oh, they're dark works, they're depressing and stuff. They're really not. They're very listenable. The first string quartet was really beautiful, but I wouldn't use that word for the second, third, and fourth. But they are interesting, and they're very listenable. Okay, this third string quartet uses unconventional approaches to traditional elements. And it wasn't published, it was written in 1922, it wasn't published until 1969. It was premiered by the Lithuanian Quartet. Yeah, boy, talk about waiting a long time. I don't know, sorry, I had to reach for a tissue there. And then another half century of oblivion followed. And now we have this recording. So... This is the least well-known of the four string quartets, I guess. This and the fourth quartet are characterized by an anxious, chromatically saturated tonality inherited from late Romanticism. So Wagner, let's say. Okay, there's a lot of chromaticism. Chromatic means that you're using all 12 notes, but it's not 12-tone writing. There's a sense of harmony, of traditional harmony, but when you put chromatic notes in that harmony, the direction of the music becomes clouded in chromatic, where you don't really know where it's headed. It's almost like walking in a fog, let's say, if you're listening. So you might want to think about that when you're listening to these works. There are traces of bright classical musical tradition in the third quartet, but not in the fourth. Anyway, let's talk about the third quartet. The third and fourth quartets both have only 3 movements, so they're shorter than the first 2. The first one, again, is a sonata form. It starts harmoniously with chords played in the ensemble. This movement has a theme with fleet scale playing up and down the neck of the instruments, which I think vaguely recalls the Baroque era. Maybe, I don't know, but I didn't really think of if I hadn't read that note, I wouldn't have thought of Baroque music at all listening to this piece. There are lots of pauses in the music before new material is heard, so he's really putting this new sort of technique to work in this particular composition. The tonality tends to climb and brighten as it develops, and then it's suddenly cut off. It's an interesting fragmentary approach carried over from the second quartet, except developed more here, and no doubt this will reveal more in repeated listenings. I need to hear this piece more times, to be honest, in order to really assess what's going on here. It was a little hard with all the constant changes of material after all the pauses. Okay, the material repeats at the end of the movement, and that tells me that this was a sonata, but I didn't really follow the form because of all this, the sudden stops and starts, and the themes aren't, I don't want to say they're not memorable, but they're not something that sticks in the brain. You really have to pay attention if you're going to follow this piece. Now that I've heard it once, I mean, I can go back and probably follow it a little better the next time, and then more the next time. I'm pretty intellectually intrigued by this music at this point, and I want to know more about it. Okay, the second movement is an allegro, which is a little unusual. Usually the middle movement of a 3-movement work is slow. But this one started with a slow movement, and the second movement is an allegro. It starts at a moderate tempo. The melody moves upward, characteristic of Karnavičius' music. And this almost 12-minute movement continues with these stops and starts. There's something almost Sisyphean about it. It's like you're pushing a rock up a mountain, like Sisyphus did, pausing, and then you have to start again. I guess the rock rolled down the mountain. I don't really hear anything of... Maybe the metaphor doesn't fit exactly, but there are pauses, and then it seems like they're starting again, a new approach. It rises, stops, laments, rises again, ends plaintively. Okay, the third and final movement is labeled Lento Tranquilo, also subverting expectations. Usually third movements or final movements are very lively. This one is very slow. It's the longest movement at 13 and a half minutes. It starts slowly and thoughtfully on the cello. There's a pause. The entire ensemble plays a slow melody and accompaniment together. There's a solo line for what could be the viola. I can't really tell the viola and cello sometimes. The cello is playing high and the viola is in its low range. I can't always tell them apart. Then the interweaving lines of the ensemble melody continues. There's a pause. At 2 minutes and 30 seconds, an entirely new, tranquil descending tonality begins. Another pause. At 3 minutes, there's an energetic rising melody with a floating 3/4 rhythm. We're going to hear that a lot in his music. As I said, rising tonality again. Moods vary between energetic and melancholy as the movement wears on, with pauses separating these moods at every chance they get, really. The solo cello reappears at about the 6 minute and 20 second mark. Viola and cello get solo lines from this point to up to 8 minutes and 30 seconds. Then the ensemble starts climbing upward again, with sudden dissonant chords cutting off the motion and melancholy themes after the pauses. Okay, the movement seems to communicate frustration to me. At the very end, there's a determined rhythm heading towards a climax, which it ultimately doesn't reach in a satisfying way. The music cuts off before any final grand statement can be made. And that's the String Quartet number 3. The final String Quartet, number 4, from 1925, has 3 movements, and they're all very polyphonic, meaning all the instruments have their own material to play. They're not necessarily playing chords. This work was never published. The Čiurlionis Quartet performed it in Lithuania in the 1980s, and now we have this recording by the Vilnius Quartet. First movement, Moderato Comodo. It sets kind of a disconcerting tone according to the booklet. It starts with that 3/4 rhythm, the floating quality 3/4 rhythm that Čiurlionis uses so often in these works. He usually uses them in the last movements, but here he begins the work with it. We start hearing the pauses we've heard in the previous 2 quartets. The melody breaks down into a squeaky chordal interpretation. And then there are these insistent sawing notes in the harmony. The music quiets a bit after this, and it always returns to its flowing 3/4 time melody, but breaks up. This pattern of material becomes familiar after a while. The movement is hard to follow, but if the first time you're listening, but it's in sonata form, and this is confirmed with the repeat of the opening material around the 7-minute mark. This movement does seem a little off, though. It doesn't really feel like it's really like a cookie cutter sort of sonata form. It's disconcerting in that it's hard to make out what the movement. How do I want to say this? It's hard to make out what the movement's after, what it's trying to say. That said, it is tonal. There's a lot of chromaticism, and it's very listenable, meaning that it's not off-putting. You won't be turned off by it. The second movement, Andante, has a kind of melancholy. The booklet says Tristanian melancholy. That recalls Wagner, so we're thinking late Romanticism here. This movement starts immediately after the first movement. They're not connected, but there's no pause, really. It just goes right into the second movement. This movement emerges out of the second movement, you could say. It sounds very forlorn, and then it quickly turns dramatic in its outbursts. There's a rising figure ending in a chord that repeats at the end of the cello's lament. This movement is also in that flowing 3/4 rhythm. He seems to like that meter to set the flowing feel and then interrupt it with oddly placed accents. The music stays in the emotional dynamic described for the whole movement, and by the end, the emotional byways of the movement brings us to, we arrive at the opening with the cello's lament, and that's how the movement ends. It doesn't really move in its mood from where it was. The third movement is labeled Allegro Animato, and it starts with this, what's labeled in the booklet as Scriabinesque swiftness and ecstasy, although ecstasy isn't really a word I'd apply to this movement. The opening sounds urgent and determined. It's got a wide striding rhythm at the opening. The motivic elements use a dotted eighth figure, so every time there's climbing, you hear the dotted eighth. dun, 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 dun. That would be a dotted eighth. There's a second theme without the motif, and all the notes are landing on the beats in this case, and there are no dotted rhythms here. It's just kind of one beat, one note per beat. Emotionally, there's a lot of resignation once the second theme begins. After 3 minutes, the motion slows even further. Something more energetic starts at about 4:15. We get the dotted rhythms again. In fact, those dotted rhythms seem to indicate when the sort of protagonist of this movement gains energy. And then the notes on the beat indicate a kind of a decreasing of energy. The energy seems to break down when the musical material starts landing on the beats, and the movement ends on an upward movement. It sounds like there could be another movement, but there isn't. This is the end of the work. Okay, string quartet number 1 is pretty easy to follow. The next 3 are very idiosyncratic to the composer, although they're kind of in a traditional form. It's all very beautifully played by the Vilnius String Quartet. And with more familiarity, I think these 3 works will add more enjoyment. They're a little I don't want to say dense. They're a little tough to follow the first time, but that's always, I see that as a good thing because it invites repeated listening. Anyway, I enjoyed these, and I think they'd be a good discovery for people who would want to hear something new.
I think they're all approachable if you're familiar with traditional classical forms and sort of romantic chamber music. The third and fourth quartets are more, overall, I would say they're more placid in character, just because they don't have that folky quality of motion that...
He just did away with that, didn't he?
Yes, especially number 1 and number 2 to a certain extent, although not as much as number 1 has. And as I said, my first impression was that they were kind of Brahms inspired, but that starts to go away in 2, and then you don't have that at all in 3 and 4, but you do get more adventurous harmonies. At the same time, I felt the kind of mercurial nature that he does show right from the beginning.
Oh, mercurial is a good word. I wish I had thought of that. Yeah,
it's intensified as sort of his kind of stylistic thing. That they're constantly changing, but what's interesting and kind of satisfying is that the pauses that he tends to include, those also kind of intensify. So as he is changing these contrasting sections, he seems to also emphasize those pauses more, which is a good thing as a listener, because there's a lot to digest from what you just heard into what he's always going to in something new within these sections. And then, the other thing is these are really long movements.
Yeah, they are.
They're not 4 or 5 minutes. You're up to 11.
They're demanding on the attention.
Yeah, 10, 11, 12 minutes. And so you need those pauses to sort of digest what you've just heard and what's coming next. But, they are long, but in those segments, they are sort of digestible and understandable, but they will take repeated listens. However, I think it's worth your investment. It's something new, especially in this kind of quartet, chamber music format. It's something you haven't probably heard before. I know I haven't.
It's based in fact, no, unless you're Lithuanian, you haven't heard these works because they haven't been recorded before.
So it's based in the very familiar repertoire, yet it's something different, and he has his own concept he's developing from that. So in that sense, I think these quartets sort of give you that nice balance in music, which is, enough familiar, comprehensible elements to grasp onto, while introducing enough of novelty and change and uniqueness that will challenge your listening. And in that sense, it's a gratifying and sort of edifying new listening experience. And in that way, I enjoyed them.
Yeah, I should mention that they're not cheerful works. So it's a little bit of darkness to them. So
they're dark. They're not dirges, but I guess if you knowing that he was
they're intellectual, kind of like cunning these kind of
If he was in captivity while these were going on, I guess I could.
I know, right? You're not going to write like a sunny work, really. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. All right. Anyway, recommended. Give these a listen. It's something new. It's something we should know about. Speaking of things we should know about contemporary composers. And my last choice for today is another contemporary composer. I'm really happy with myself for having been able to program a contemporary composer for the last 3 episodes, and I'm going to have another one next week, hopefully. Although an older one. Okay,
You're hip
today
with the in crowd.
The in crowd. Yeah, these are people I want to hang out with. Contemporary works. Yeah. This is basically the classical music that people don't listen to, and they should, because this is your contemporary music. I want to recommend it, and I really want to encourage listeners to give, especially this album, a listen. This particular one. This is by the French composer, Eric Tanguy. He was born in Caen in 1968, so he's our contemporary, Russ. This is an album of two concertos, actually, the Clarinet Concerto and Violin Concerto No. 2. And there's a brief orchestra work separating them called Matka, which has a Finnish theme to it. This is also on the Ondine label, I guess appropriately a Finnish label for the Sibelius-inspired work Matka. Okay, the performance on this album, on the solo clarinet and the Clarinet Concerto, is Pierre Génisson. The violinist in the Violin Concerto No. 2 is Julia Pusker. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I couldn't find she's Hungarian. And the Jyväskylä Sinfonia, conducted by Ville Matveyev. There it is. Okay. Eric Tanguy, who is he? Well, he composes, one of the things that attracted me to him, he's a modal composer, so he doesn't really use traditional major and minor keys and scales to write his music. He writes in modes. Modes were used in Gregorian chant and in early church music very often, and they have this floaty quality, although I didn't get a floaty quality here from his music. It doesn't have to have a floaty quality. They just chose those. There are different modes. Okay. In the program notes for this album, he mentions the initiative for the works. Okay. The Clarinet Concerto, and you don't really need to know what they are to listen to this music. You'll just be equally enjoyable or confused by them, depending on how you think about them. All right, the Clarinet Concerto was commissioned as a work to be played at a concert that included Mozart's Clarinet Concerto. So this soloist was going to play, this poor guy is going to play the Mozart Clarinet Concerto, and this very difficult work. Yeah. It really sounds hard, but it's very impressive. I mean, when you hear the recording, I think you'll be impressed by Génisson's playing. And the work Matka was written for the 150th anniversary of Sibelius, but neither of these works has anything to do with these works or the composers. No. Okay. Anyway, they were just written to be played at concerts where these works were being played at.
He has a marketing strategy for getting yourself on the program anyway. That's good.
Okay. I do want to mention, I do want people listening to this and to contemporary composers in general, even though we're being funny. Okay, so please do give this a listen. Okay, modal harmony. The thing to understand about this, it doesn't have a direction. When you listen to something that's in a major key or a minor key, Western classical music has developed in a way, especially since Beethoven, where if you have a key and you say what that key is, the music is generally heading somewhere, and you get this sense of heading towards what Aristotle called a telos, or a goal, or an end point. Modal harmony can't achieve that because the notes that are used in the modal scale aren't balanced in such a way that they can resolve to something. Although I guess some of them have that sense of resolve. Major minor scales absolutely have that sense of resolve. If you listen to if you play a scale and you stop on the 7th degree of that scale, there's extreme tension. You want to hear that tonic note again. You want it to resolve. That's not the case in modal music. That doesn't happen. So in music like this, what's happening now in the moment, in what you're hearing at this moment, is going to be of most importance. You could almost say this is sort of like a Zen Buddhist kind of a approach to music. Okay, because you have to be listening to what's happening now and enjoy the moment.
Play the scale now.
It's going to disappear, and you're going to go into something else.
Yes. All right. Play the scale now, and don't worry about what comes next.
Right. Okay, it's where the instrument is and where it winds up that's important, not where it's going. Okay, it's just kind of, and it's not like it's just meandering and not going anywhere, but it's just that the moment is really what's going to be important here. So if you're spiritually inclined, I don't know, these might be good works for you to listen to, although they don't really seem to be particularly spiritual works themselves. They're instrumental. They're absolute music, really. Okay, I need another tissue. Excuse me. All right. Clarinet Concerto, composed in 2017. This is a very recent work. You're on the cutting edge, listener. All right, this is a 3-movement work. The first movement is labeled intense, in English, which would simply be intense, right? It starts quickly with an odd, throbbing, loud, soft, winding melody. The clarinet starts at the very bottom of its range and climbs up, and that is excellent because I love hearing the low end of the clarinet, so I was engaged in this right away. I loved hearing that reedy bottom note of the instrument. The clarinet is very busy in this movement. It often trills. There are a lot of trills, and it plays that kind of winding figure that you hear at the beginning. It has to suddenly change rhythm and melodic shape, which is also very important, not important, but impressive, virtuosically speaking. There's a softer, more melodic section, and textures change very suddenly in the movement. The clarinet often has to leap from its bottom to the top end, difficult to do on a wind instrument. A very impressive and athletic performance from the soloist, and this is a jumpy movement that ends without resolution. The second movement is the slow one. It's labeled très doux, which means very sweet, sweetly. The orchestra starts reminiscent of Bartók's night music, I thought. If you think of Bartók's night music, it has a floaty modal sort of quality to it. The clarinet is still pretty active despite the tempo. In this case, it trills a lot. It leaps from its middle into its high range very often. The clarinet never has a sense of repose in this slow movement. Usually you would think a slow movement would be a little more melodic, but not the case here. There is a quieter melodic section 4 minutes in, and it briefly builds to something more menacing at 5 minutes and 30 seconds. Then it quietens again. This movement ends with haunting string harmonics as the clarinet trails off. The third movement, as many French works are labeled, is labeled vif, which means very fast. The orchestra plays a few flourishes at the beginning. Then the clarinet leaps all over its range, playing brief motifs. It kind of reminds me of a fly inside a house, aimlessly flying around and briefly stopping here or there. The solo instrument puts across a sense of restlessness, always wandering, attention always being diverted. Maybe like a modern internet user, perhaps. I don't know. It gets high up in its range at times in this movement, squealing out the top notes. You don't really hear that very often.
It's a bit jazzy in this one, yeah.
Yeah, I guess you're just kind of squeezing those notes out. There's an impressive cadenza inside the 5-minute mark where he plays by himself. Give that a listen. After the cadenza, a rhythmic figure develops, driven by the timpani, and the imprint of the timpani stays for the rest of the work. I'm really giving a very general view of this work. There are a lot of details. It quickly disappears and new ideas pursued. But what I want to say is there's much to hear in this work on repeated listenings. I bet there are a lot of details that you're going to miss the first, second, or third time that you hear this work. At 6 minutes and 34 seconds, there's a big orchestral crescendo that abruptly cuts off on an accent and leads to a cadenza dramatically and at first slowly taken. It ends on a high tessitura. Then the orchestra quietly comes in as the violin picks up the clarinet picks up a quietly resigned melodic line. I wrote violin. I don't know why. And this isn't just a showpiece. This work has a sense of drama to it, despite its modality. It's well conducted. Matveyev allows the orchestra to breathe naturally at the selected tempos. It never. This is a modern work or contemporary work, and it never sounds mechanical or overly careful, as performances of new works can. I really liked this, actually. So I think you should give it a listen.
Yeah, it's his approach to harmony is different. He says he has his own harmonic language, so that can sort of leave you, sort of in a kind of a limbo. But what he does do is he uses more traditional compositional techniques and developments, so the arc of the pieces are well constructed. And so while you don't get harmonic resolutions that you expect, you're pushed along by different contrasts and developments in the orchestration that lead you to kind of successful sort of they're not harmonic cadences, so to speak, but they're more sort of compositional signposts. And
nice.
And so, he takes you through those, and there's a lot of dense harmonies in the orchestra. They're really closely arranged in the instruments, and they don't resolve in a traditional sense that you're expecting. But
they can't really.
Yeah, they can't because they're not going
because
to.
of the modal harmony.
Yeah.
Right.
However, they do resolve sort of compositionally, and then there are tension builds and releases in the way that the composition is put through, and so it does give you something to latch onto in sort of the arc of what's going on, and so in that way it's kind of easy to follow in a traditional sort of tension and release type of direction. There is direction in this music. It's just not harmonically.
Yeah, it's not harmonic direction.
So.
It's
however, if you focus on the clarinet itself, there's lots of virtuosic playing, and those all seem very logically constructed, and having lots of sort of pyrotechnics and then conclusions to the phrases. So. It's modern, but yet contains enough in a sort of linear kind of projection that you'll be able to go through and notice, the destination of the piece.
Yeah, I'd say it's not difficult on the ear at all. I mean, it's very listenable. But it's challenging, I guess, intellectually. I think as far as the form goes, if you're somebody who knows a little bit about classical forms, a modal piece can't really be a sonata. You can use modal elements in a sonata form, but you can't. So the modes can't drive the sonata towards its conclusion. So the way I felt like listening to this piece, and really to all of the works on this CD, was that. If you think of a painted panel, those kind of panels that that kind of fold up and there's a painting on them. It felt like you were just walking down a hall and there were all these sort of like different painted panels, and you're just kind of like viewing them all, and then the work ends at the end. So there's a direction you're heading towards the end of the hall, right. Even though the panel is, but it's not a sense of any kind of like big aim from the beginning. You're not ending in a place where that's sort of obvious from the beginning if you understand the form.
Right.
That's kind of what I got.
You can't really modulate and then sort of have these traditional kind of cadences there. So it sort of depends. I guess in that sense, in order to show his direction, he has to rely on other sort of compositional techniques rather than traditional sort of harmonic tension and release. So
right. Anyway. on we go. Separating the two concerti and the meat in this particular CD sandwich, or album sandwich, is the symphonic work Matka, written in 2015. It's a Finnish title, and Matka refers to both the idea of traveling in Finland, but at the same time to an inner journey and introspection. So if you're an introspective type, this might be the work for you. It has a cloudy, mystical opening with gentle metal percussion effects that sound like silvery raindrops. I really enjoyed hearing those. This grows into a section featuring the winds. It kind of gradually reaches that, sort of expands in a way. Strings eventually enter, a crescendo ensues, leading to a climax. Then the music quietens again and starts to build up again. Tanguy seems to go for orchestral shapes made by his modal harmony. There's a nice brass section in this part of the work, followed by a quiet, quasi-magical bit supported by shimmering strings where the various winds get solo lines. I really enjoyed this part. I especially like the enchanting use of gentle-sounding metal percussion instruments at certain points of the movement, making the sound leap out of the relatively flat texture created by the strings and winds. Solo strings get a short section near the end, particularly the violin. Nice lead into the next work, which is going to be a violin concerto. There's a full orchestral build-up to a bold ending led by the brass. Again, this is a work for the 21st century mind that keeps leaping to new ideas and is restless. He knows how we think, we internet users. There's real content here, though. Don't think this is empty music. And there's so much detail and changes of character that the work repays repeated listenings. It's a good work for people who think they don't like contemporary music. Okay, so give that a listen if you're one of those people.
Yeah, this is what, Sibelius dedication, right?
Yeah, this is the one that was dedicated to Sibelius' 150th anniversary of his birth, I think.
And so you can't do that without a nice homage to the brass, and he does insert that in here. And so I liked that contrast between the winds and then some satisfying brass.
Of course you did.
Even
brass.
Yeah, of course. That's what I'm always listening for.
Fan.
So I got it. I was listening to this walking down the road, looking at the autumn colors, and I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, nice.
I had read the notes, and I remember, okay, Sibelius, and then boom, the brass hit me. I said, okay, yes. Yeah, interesting piece. You know, it's just one movement, so you probably have to listen to it a few times to get the arc of what's going on here. But it does have, you know, tensions and releases, and you're going to get the contrast in timbres or tones throughout the work, and it has a satisfying resolution.
Right. Okay. Now the final work on this album is the Violin Concerto No. 2. Written in 1997 and revised in the year 2003. We're hearing the revised version. Now, last week, our adult music podcast episode was called Mirror, Mirror, I think, right? That was the last one. Right. We should have probably put this album on that one. I wish I had sort of reversed them. Although, yeah, the and the Mahler were the mirror part for the classical music. Because this work really mirrors the Clarinet Concerto, or the Clarinet Concerto mirrors this. They're very similar. They're on three movements. This was written 20 years before the Clarinet Concerto, but the three movements virtually have the same tempo markings, and the work unfolds in a similar way. Okay, the first movement is called Intense et très lyrique. The violin solo begins the piece, which is unusual. Although these days, I guess, you can do anything you want, really. The orchestra shadows its melody. And when I say shadow, what I mean is it repeats part of it. Sort of like a shadow is kind of like part of your sort of body. It doesn't show your whole outline. So it shadows part of the melody. The solo goes into a high tessitura. Tessitura means the entire range of the instrument that's being written for. It's important for a composer to know an instrument's tessitura so he can write appropriately for it. But this is the higher end of the violin that the violin can play in. Very early on, we hear these kind of really high notes in the violin. The violin is very busy throughout the movement, as was the clarinet. This seems to be a feature of Tanguy's concertos, I could say. Again, there are many quick changes of orchestral texture, solo melody, and rhythm. though this time the piece stays with its ideas longer. I think with the Clarinet Concerto, which came 20 years later, he's a bit more compact with his ideas. Here he tends to sort of lengthen them a bit so that we get a little more familiar with them. There's a fair amount of the movement has lyrical playing on the violin, but it doesn't stay that way for long. As in the Clarinet Concerto, there's a solo cadenza for the Violin Concerto at about the 6 minute and 30-second mark, and it's pretty tranquil, unlike the Clarinet Concerto. There's a shimmering orchestral section after the cadenza that builds up to something foreboding for the solo violin to get jittery over, and it plays a pretty excitable melody or figuration. The orchestra is reminiscent of waves crashing against a cliff. It's got that sort of held back energy that suddenly crescendos with accents on the timpani. So it's kind of like pulling back and then slowly crescendos and then poof, you know. The movement ends with the violin playing a dramatic high line and landing on a big orchestral accent. It's really cool, actually. I like the ending, the way this particular movement ended. The second movement is marked dolce, or sweet, again, similar to the Clarinet Concerto. It begins with the driftiness, reminiscent of Bartók's night music, as the Clarinet Concerto did. The violin drifts above it in this case. The orchestral accompaniment grows eerie, and mostly through the vibrato-less winds as the violin becomes more agitated. When this happened, by the way, I listened to this whole album in one sitting. Okay, I didn't listen to one piece at a time. At this point, in this second movement of the Violin Concerto, I was in an interesting mental state. I had this soft but very direct focus on what I was hearing. Hearing this entire album changed the state of my mind. So if you're one of these people who wants to change the state of your mind, this might be the album to go for. I was really locked into what was happening and wide awake. You know, the sound coming out of the speakers was the only thing that existed in the world. So this music sort of released me, or hearing all of this up to now released me. You might want to try that. I think it had a lot to do with the music not having I said not having a direction. We already said it has a direction, but what I mean is it doesn't have a harmonic direction because of the modal harmony. So my brain just tried to be with it as it moved from place to place. I think it eventually kind of caught up with that. It wasn't quite a spiritual state, though, so if you're somebody who meditates, don't get too excited. The movement ends quietly with the gentle strings fading out. And then the third movement, the final movement, marked vif, as in the Clarinet Concerto. The violin saws away on double-stop notes as this movement begins. There's some very cool brass in chorale-like chords after 1 minute. And then the violin becomes hyperactive again. This sounds really challenging and tiring to play. Really, modern... Any soloist playing a modern concerto or a contemporary concerto is really... almost like a Superman of his instrument. They may really make them do incredible things. There's a kind of rhythmic drive that develops in the orchestra that spurs the violin on. It all suddenly stops, and the violin plays a rather melancholy solo line, and then erupts into hyperactivity again after the orchestral comments. There are a lot of interesting combinations of orchestral timbres supporting the violin line. I thought this work had interesting ideas, but it wasn't as inventively orchestrated as the Clarinet Concerto, although it's similarly shaped. Tanguy apparently learned a few things in 20 years. So I thought this album, all in all, was enjoyable, but it was a bit demanding, okay? Intellectually, I thought it was tiring to listen to, but then again, I listened to the whole thing at once. Maybe you shouldn't do that. The constant changes in the orchestra writing and rhythmic and melodic profiles made me tired after the 74 minutes. This is quick-changing, high-information music. I wrote down that do you remember... If anyone's seen The Matrix, you remember when they kind of connect Neo to the Matrix and he learns like Kung Fu in 3 seconds, like the entirety of Kung Fu? I kind of felt like something like that happened to me when I listened to this album. Like the entire internet or something, or the entirety of something was loaded into my brain. There's a lot of stuff here. Okay. I wonder how much tango can do with modal harmony in large-scale works. It's tiring, but a rewarding listen. I enjoyed this, too. This is just a great listening week for me.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed this because I felt that in the sort of modern stream of music, it's a composer who gives me sort of the branch or a life jacket as I go along the stream of the composition. And what I mean by that is, I admit my biases. I'm sort of a traditionalist in the music that I like in any genre.
I'm kind of like that too, but I like to be challenged. Though.
I like to be
challenged.
Pushed.
Yeah.
So if it's in, it doesn't matter the genre really, whether it's classical or jazz. I like to have as much familiar elements as I can, and then the inventive part, can be a large percentage of that if it's based around sort of a established structure. So when we disengage an important one of the three elements, harmony, in other words, we have a composer who says, I use my own harmonic language, and which he identifies.
That's always a terrifying statement.
And then we take one of the major elements and someone reinvents that. If I'm going to be able to follow along, especially on an initial listen, I'm going to need a lot to help me get through that.
Right.
And so I think in that sense, he does really well with the development arc of the compositions, and you're not going to have the harmonic resolutions and modulations and things that you're going to, expect as a listener of Baroque and classical music or Romantic music, classical music in general before, sort of contemporary periods. But he incorporates enough of the sort of compositional development to keep you satisfied and intrigued. And he also, varies the sort of usage of timbre in the instruments really well too. So you don't get, one thing about modes, because modes don't resolve, you can sort of get zoned out in a mode.
I think that's what happened to me by the second movement of the Violin Concerto.
Like Irish music,
something happens.
Irish music or something, you can sort of...
Like Irish reels, like dance music, you mean the ones that kind of circle around a lot.
You can sort of, unless you bang your head when you're dancing to it, you're not going to wake up from it or something.
That music's written to be danced to, though. It's not really supposed to be listened to.
But what I mean is, he, within the modes, there's enough variety here of instrumentation, and he does play with the colors and the other sort of developments. So there are, how can I say, tension and release non-harmonically built up through the dynamics and the contrasting sections of the orchestra. So it's sort of like that element of, how can I say, a larger compositional structure building to climaxes and things, that if you could extract the harmony from that and reconfigure it, what he's done, that similar arc of other things with crescendos and variants of tone is still there in his music. So he's sort of focused on reinventing the harmony in his own style, but most of the other elements in the use of the full orchestra with contrasts and dynamics is still there for you to latch on to. And so I was looking for that, and I found enough of that to pull me through all of the movements. And then I could, on a second listen, I could appreciate more of the other things that were going on. So in that sense, I think it's still approachable modern music that will sort of...
I think it's very approachable.
Yeah,
it's not hard. It's just like kind of dense. I think that's the only thing that...
Yeah,
I don't think that would put people off, but it's just sort of overwhelming, like all these ideas coming at you at the same time.
Yeah, and the harmonic language, as he says, that he develops, it is kind of thick and dense. I mean, you can do different things with modal kind of music. You can kind of keep it open voice, but his is there are dense harmonies in there that you'll think, oh, this is really thick here as it's going on, and then it will change to something else because there's a lot of rhythmic variation too, which you need if you're going to stay in certain modes. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting stuff, and in the structure, you've got enough to hold on to pull you through the sort of mysterious modal things that he works with sometimes. So, it's worth a listen, and will stretch your imagination a little bit for the arc of these modern works.
Right. I just want to say to the listeners, if we've talked you out of listening to this piece, I think you should just go listen to it and then listen to what we have to say about it, because I know it's not possible to understand what we're talking about without having heard the work first. So give that a listen.
When you get to things that you're not used to listening to, it makes it even harder to explain and talk about. So,
and you explain, and then the listeners haven't heard the word; they have no idea what it sounds like.
It's really
and then
hard.
You're saying all these things. Yeah,
it's really hard to explain these works. Yeah. So you've got to actually hear it and then relate to it a little bit better.
Anyway, that's what the links are for, listeners. So let's try that. Okay, that's all we have for classical this week. And I want to say that if I had to make a list of which of these recordings I enjoyed most this week, the 3 jazz recordings would be numbers 1, 2, and 3. These were really great picks this week. This was a great jazz week for me.
Oh, that's great, because I had this growing list of jazz albums, and I had so many. I thought, well, not that I'm necessarily going to all introduce them in instrumentation, but just to get myself a frame of reference, I started grouping them according to what they featured. And over the course of time since the summer, I noticed, okay, I've got this album, and the leaders are all drummers. And so they just popped out in my mind. I said, okay, I've got these 3 releases where the featured leader is a drummer, which doesn't happen very often. Not that it's unusual, because we have in jazz, of course, Art Blakey, Max Roach, as sort of leaders of groups, but we don't normally have the drummer as the lead figure. In a lot of
back
recordings.
In the day, Chick Webb, right? Was
Chick Webb. Yeah. I mean, there's other Shelley Mann. But here, we've got 3 that have come out recently. And
I want to say that's a shame, because it seems like drummers are the best leaders in ensembles for reasons that I'm sure we'll get into today.
Yeah. And so we've got a kind of nice variety within the drum leaders here, too. Well, I didn't realize it when I had first written this down, but the first one is a double album.
It's right there. Okay.
Go on. And so we're going to start out with Songs from My Father, which is kind of, I guess, maybe in a jazz world, a play, because the Horace Silver,
the very famous Horace Silver
song
album.
For My Father. This is Songs from My Father by Jerry Gibbs. And of course, his father would be Terry Gibbs, the great vibraphonist whose career stretches back to the bebop era. I mean, he played with the bebop greats, even Charlie Parker, I believe, and he's still alive at I think he's like 97
he's 94,
years old.
I think I read.
97 years old.
97, jeez.
Yeah. And
he looks pretty good in the photos I saw. So
amazing career. He started out as a drummer and percussionist, and then switched to focusing on vibes. This is on Wailing City Sound Records, which I've never heard of before. I don't know. If
we should mention, by the way, his son Jerry Gibbs is a drummer. Yeah. Is the drummer. This is how we did say drummer led, but I just want to make that connection
Jerry's
clear.
A drummer extraordinaire.
He certainly is.
Performed with lots of different ensembles, and this is his in his own releases. This is his 13th release as a leader, as a drummer. He's also a multi-percussionist, and you'll hear on this album some Brazilian percussion done really well. And so the idea here, and one of his concepts of his leaders is he's had a trio which he calls his Thrasher Dream Trio, which sounds sort of like more like metal music or something, but it's not that at all. So to honor his father, he picked 18 songs from many of the tunes that his father had written and recorded, his original compositions, and reinterpreted them in his own sense with modern arrangements. And then inside of the coronavirus pandemic, he went on sort of journeys around the country to record these with his picks of trios. And this include the giants of our time to record with. And well, this album claims, I don't know, maybe we'll find out later, because I think I've read this about several other recordings, but the last recorded performance of Chick Corea is supposedly...
that's what Chick Corea's agent said, according to Jerry Gibbs. So it probably is. I mean, this is probably the last recorded performance of Chick Corea.
Because we heard him a few weeks ago with Iliani Elias, with
and
too,
he has a new live album out too that we didn't talk about. So I don't know.
Maybe we should
do that one too. Is that on the list?
Not really, but
we should put it on.
We could put it on there.
Wouldn't mind
anyway, this may, if his agent says this is the last one, then it's probably true. But we're not only going to get Chick Corea here and in combination Ron Carter, but also Kenny Barron, who we're going to hear on our next album as well.
Yes.
In a tasty recording situations. But the bassist Buster Williams, another fine pianist Patrice Rushin, the great organist Larry Goldings, another technically amazing pianist Jeff Keyser, and of course the master of modern bass Christian McBride. So I think
Christian McBride would be to contemporary what Ron Carter was to the the golden age of jazz, really, in the 60s and 50s. I think he's gonna be like this.
Jerry Gibbs was really going all out to get all these recordings done with these different groups, and his own drum playing is just fabulous. And so we've got on this double album sort of alternating tunes with these various groups with a variety of moods and things from compositions from his father. And this is just a great double album that...
one disc wouldn't have been enough for this. This is just so fantastic.
It's well worth two, and it's got enough variety and brilliant musicianship. It could have just kept going. And so, well, let's go through it. It starts out with a tune, Kick Those Feet. And this is with, all of these have Gibbs on drums, just the bass and piano changes. So the first tune is with Kenny Barron on piano, Buster Williams on bass. It's a swinging minor melody that has some drum breaks incorporated into the melody. Buster Williams has this huge fat tone on all of these recordings. It's like this super bass sound. It's great with force. And you're going to hear on all these recordings, and as well as on the next album, we're going to hear Kenny Barron's class just comes right through. Harmonic sophistication, beautiful intensity, lots of class in his solos. And they lock in well here together with Kenny Barron's rhythmic variations with the bass and drums like One Mind. Buster Williams has a great solo here too that he walks through, and he gets some nice glisses to mix it up, and Gibbs shows some tasty fills in here. So it's a nice opening. The next tune, Smoke 'Em Up. Here we switch
some good titles.
Yeah, it's a nice title. Patrice Rushin on piano, Larry Goldings on organ. So we're going to rely on the organ bass pedals for bass on the tunes that Goldings is on. And Rushin, in comparison to Kenny Barron and Chick Corea, has a kind of lighter touch, although later on he shows some more digging in. But here we get a really nice funky groove from Gibbs's drumming, and then Goldings here. This is straight up blues. Listen for Goldings' really bass pedal funk bass on this. Sometimes you hear organ players and they have kind of the bass pedals are playing sort of an amorphous bass that's going on. This is really funky stuff here that he's doing on the bass pedals. Russian gets some fluid bassy lines, bluesy lines here, and these funk chopped chords along with his solo. And Golding's solo is really fluid here too. His organ style is a very straight tone. He doesn't use like a lot of Leslie tone to get things mixed up a lot. He generally keeps it really straight in his playing, and that's just a feature of his style. But this is a really good digging in blues and has a nice fun ending too. Next up is Bopstickle Course, and
great title again.
Great title, right?
Yeah.
Here we get Chick Corea and Ron Carter joining in with Gibbs. It's a happy swinging bop melody, and Chick plays it through really light and relaxed here. Carter gets some walking space with chords and accents from Gibbs and Corea, and then Gibbs has some really tight roll action in this tune, showing off his drum technique.
I want to mention, too, that this is the first track we hear Ron Carter on. I was thinking, Ron Carter has such presence. When he plays the bass, he'll be easy to identify. But actually, on this album, that's really not the case, because Buster Williams and Christian McBride are both like just monster players, too. And they have this big, fat sound. So it was really, that speaks well for them, considering that Ron Carter's such a monster.
Because what I assume is, he's traveling around and recording these in different locations and studios to meet with these people. There is a discrepancy in the recording quality of the different groups, and I thought with this Ron Carter's bass here it's not quite as much presence in the recording as the ones with Buster Williams.
The recording. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, of course, individual players' tones and things will play in, but I could tell an overall sort of quality difference in the mixing and mastering maybe of these different groups. If you listen to them, you might see what I'm talking about here. But they obviously were recorded in different locations to get all of this going on. Now we're up to a tune, Nutty Notes. Now here, we're going to get an amazing pianist, Jeffrey Keyser, who has been nominated for Grammy Awards. Yeah, and when he records something new, I definitely want to take a look and get it on the podcast. And
he's a new name for me, actually. I hadn't heard him before.
I've known his name from the past, but I haven't heard anything from him recently, so it sort of slipped out of my kind of focus. But you will take notice here, and we've got Christian McBride in the trio here too. This is a blazing stop time minor melody riff tune, and Keyser just rips through it. And then he goes into.
He sounds classical, really, actually, in this opening melody. Yeah, it's just like a classical pianist.
You get a solo. He's showing just amazing technique with scales, and he completely dismantles the riff and takes it apart in what he does with it. And he never runs out of ideas or fingers to express them. Then, I mean, it's a blazing tempo. McBride gets some walking space to show off here, and he shows his usual surgeon-like precision here. But yeah, if you haven't heard Jeffrey Keyser, check out the technique on this tune. And
this is amazing. I think I even spotted some quotes from Chopin's Fantasy Impromptu in C sharp minor. I think he directly quotes that piece in this.
I believe he does. Yeah. Just amazing blazing keyboard technique. This guy's got chops to just burn with. The next tune, Take It From Me. We're going to go to Kenny Barron. on piano here, and back to Buster Williams. It's a mid-tempo swing tune, and Baron is one of these players like I guess like we've talked about in recent episodes, George Cable's just classy touch, and
he's class. Yeah, Baron, he really is. I'll have more to say about him later.
One of things that made me I've known about him for a long time and listened to him, but there's a multi-disc, maybe even 7-disc playing. It's one of Stan Getz's last recordings called People Time, and it's just piano and sax, and it's Kenny Barron and Stan Getz. And so you really get on that recording to hear Kenny Barron as like the whole rhythm section taking over for everything. And he can do that really well and take on all those roles of, carrying the bass line, counterpoint, chords, and then a really wonderful sense of touch and dynamics in his own solos. And he does that a lot on this album. And I particularly like this combination with Buster Williams' pudgy bass sound. So on this tune,
he gets the fattest bass sound I think on this entire album.
Huge fat, yeah.
Although the other ones are pretty fat too.
Yeah, tightly here too with his brushes. You get some nice spaces that are left open by Barron and Williams to kind of spackle those kind of brushwork. You can just see those kind of images of getting painted on the walls. This is very classic playing. Yeah. Now the next one, Sweet Young Song of Love. And now we're back to Chick Corea with Ron Carter again. It opens with this descending chord kind of pattern with a tight snare, fills and bursts into a minor samba. Carter pumps out the pulse over Gibbs's real complex rhythms, and then the rhythm loosens up for Corea's solo first part, and then it gets re-sambified, if that's a word, as it goes on.
It is now.
Yeah. There's a huge break before a rather melodic Ron Carter solo, and then there's another change up and kind of Latin percussion intensity before a short drum solo break, and then Corea comes back with a synth solo on this one, and they really keep it working right to the end on this one. So
I was wondering about this because during the synth solo, you hear the piano still playing, so I guess he overdubbed it.
Must be, yeah.
It must be. Okay, so I was wondering about that.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that Gibbs has overdubbed a lot of the Brazilian percussion.
I was wondering about that too. Yeah. Okay, because it sounded like a bit much for one person to be doing.
Okay. Next up, the Fat Man. Who's that? Can't be us, because we're not fat men.
Well, we're just I am just mildly overweight. I have to just get to the gym. I'll be cool.
Not that fat. Anyway.
No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't call myself fat, really. No. Okay.
We're back to Jeffrey Keezer and Christian McBride. It's a grooving drum intro and piano riff blues. Keezer is funky and very creative harmonically. He's got some real harmonic ideas and chops here, too. After a break with some solo piano chords, the beat changes to shuffle, which is kind of cool. And then McBride gets a bowed solo. Bowed bass, which is always cool. And Keezer is kind of tinkling the melody out up above on that, so that's cool. There's a few solo breaks for Gibbs too, and then back to the funky beat of the melody, and then there's also a nice final solo piano melody spot for Keezer, so it changes up on this fun tune.
Yeah, he's more jazzy on this particular track because I was thinking of him as more classically oriented on the first one. This has like this Ramsey Lewis type rhythm to it. Right. I really like that. It really is. Whenever I hear this, I think of him. So it really says something to Ramsey Lewis. He like invented his own sort of
that kind
sound,
of groove.
Yeah, it's kind of a groove oriented.
The 60s groove, and then this one it gets that change up too, which is nice. Next, Lonely Days. Switch here to Patrice Rushen again on piano and Larry Goldings on organ. This is a slow, even groove with huge, deep bass pedals and washes on the organ from Goldings. Rushen lays the delicate piano melody on top, and Gibbs really clicks on the groove here.
Yeah, she gives a really nice solo here, actually.
Yeah. Tasty, restrained solos from Russian and Goldings here. This one really makes you want to be like on a boat with any drink that contains rum. That's what I was thinking when I was listening to it.
Russian gets this nice chimey sound on the piano too, and I'm just like enamored of just bell sounds in general, so I just really sucked into that. It was really fantastic. Yeah.
Just that enough hang on those notes in the style that's great. Now here, we're going to get... this is a variation. I forget the original title, actually.
They didn't say what it was. I tried to look for it, but he renamed it.
It's renamed. Actually,
Jerry Gibbs' father renamed it.
But so this is a reworking of a original piece by Terry Gibbs, and so this one they just is retitled for Hey Chick. And so this is really...
I guess it was Hey Somebody originally.
Hey Somebody, yeah. I forgot what it was. I have to go back to the original notes. But so this is very cool what they've done here, what Jerry Gibbs has done. I'm glad he only did this on one tune.
Yeah.
Because it would be a gimmick otherwise. Yeah. But it's very cool. So he takes this tune and he incorporates all of the trios into it, as well as his father's original vibraphone solo from, I think, 1961 or something, onto this track. So the original solo is incorporated in here, and it starts out, and you've got Goldings with an organ solo. It's really cool. The melody kind of hints at the chords to Softly as a Morning Sunrise, so Goldings quotes that a bit. And then the piece transitions through 5 additional solos of the various trios. So you've got Gibbs with Goldings and Ron Carter, and then Kenny Barron and Buster Williams, and then Russian and Goldings, and then Keyser and McBride, and finally Ron Carter, and then Buster Williams, or Christian McBride and Ron Carter, and then Buster Williams, Larry Goldings, and Christian McBride, respectively. So it goes through all the trios. And
did you figure? Yeah, they sound like they were spliced in.
Yeah, they're all spliced. Yeah. So he obviously recorded those all with everyone, and then he must have had them synced, and so that they could all be spliced in. So it's very cool. It's seamless.
But how do you know who was playing when? Did you read this?
It's on his original notes, the order and how he did it. Yeah.
Because I was going to ask you, can you figure out who the pianist is on each part? Because I was trying to figure that out.
Yeah. I could tell Barron, and I could tell...
Which one was Barron?
Well,
I thought he was last.
After the organ one.
I got it wrong now.
Then it's with... so you got Larry Goldings first, and then you've got Kenny Barron and Buster Williams. Yeah. So it's next
I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah.
I would have thought Barron was the last one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's really well done. You wouldn't know, but at the same time, splicing that together, you wouldn't want the whole album to be done like that, or it could be gimmicky. Right. So I'm glad that they just did it with that one tune, but it's kind of a cool effect to get everyone together. It was nice to hear
on this one track. Yeah,
just that one track, and to hear his father's vibes laid over that too is really cool. Then we move on to the rest of the second CD. Then we've got a tune, Townhouse 3, and this is Gibbs with Russian again and Larry Goldings. This is a fast samba beat, and Gibbs adds a lot of Brazilian percussion on this one. It's the monkey drum.
Cuica, what is that? Is that the thing that goes?
Yeah. Right, the monkey drum.
That's called the monkey drum. I was wondering. I was listening. I was wondering what that was. I thought it might have been the organ.
I believe they call it cuica. It's a drum that has a sort of wooden dowel or post that goes through the head. It's in through the skin. And what they do is they rub that stick with like a cloth that creates friction. And then by placing fingers on the head of the drum, you change the pitch of that also. So you can change the intensity. Wow. Yeah, so it's played with friction rather than hitting the instrument. It always creats that, surprising kind of voice-like monkey quality.
Right. So he had to
must be overdubbed, yeah.
Multi-track this. Okay.
Right. So on this one, Goldings keeps the pace going on the foot pedal bass. Rushan's more aggressive here with an exciting solo to match the mood. And then you get a Brazilian percussion breakdown with a transition to a fast swing for Golding's organ solo that has some real blazing lines in it. Then it returns to the samba beat. So some nice rhythmic change-ups. Really cool tune.
Cool organ solo, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next, T&S is the name of the tune. Here, Gibbs is back with Kenny Barron and Buster Williams. It's a happy swing tune with a syncopated melody. There's a nice bass and drum feature inserted into the melody. It's classy and inspired soloing from Barron. Gibbs gets some tasty drum work over spacey piano chords as well. Then it changes up to a bluesy groove with Barron's left hand setting it in before Williams kind of fades it out. The next tune is called 4 a.m. And here, Keyser is back on piano with Christian McBride. This is kind of a boppy, snaking melody that's doubled in the piano and bass. Gibbs mixes up the rhythms here, and Keyser and McBride are on fire and having fun. They bring it down, outlining the chords for Gibbs to have a final run of fun on drums, and then McBride walks along on this one. It's a nice feature with more Keyser piano work. After that, Waltz for My Children. Chick Corea is back here with Ron Carter. Starts out with cymbals and Corea's big chords, setting the feel for a pretty swinging waltz. There's some nice cross rhythms between Carter and Corea, as Chick finds lots of pretty ideas to play over this. And he ends this one up with nice impressionistic piano runs.
I invented the word Guaraldi-esque to describe this because it reminded me of like Guaraldi tones skating from the Charlie Brown specials, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. That waltzy feel
that
to
one.
It.
Yeah. He did a lot of waltzy feels, Guaraldi, for the Peanut specials.
Nice, yeah.
This sort of recalls that in a way.
After that, we get Hippie Twist. Nice tune number. So Rushan on piano and Goldings on organ again. It's a really funky beat and riff for a shuffle feel on this bluesy minor tune. Goldings starts out first with a bluesy solo, and he hands it off to Rushan. They both trade off with Goldings a bit more psychedelic in Goldings' return when they start to trade off here. And then they go in unison and have some fun with the ending, kind of a hippie blues thing here.
I wonder what the impetus for this title was, if there was something he saw.
Yeah, I don't know. Probably came out of the 60s, looking at all the youngsters.
Ah, yes, the youngsters.
The youngsters, those young hippies. Then we've got Lonely Dreams. This is back to Barron on piano, Buster Williams on bass, a slow ballad with a pretty melody cradled by Barron and brushed by Gibbs.
Yeah.
I like the alliteration. Williams is fat and steady below. This is a huge bass sound. This sounds so great.
Yeah.
And Barron's solo has real extended lines and also attention to sensitive dynamics. Very classy.
Yeah.
Next is For Keeps. Keyser's back on piano with Christian McBride on bass here. It's a syncopated swinging tune. It sounds like some other tune that I've heard before. I can't quite put my finger on it. It's an original tune that sounds like a standard, right? Keyser plays a lot of accented big chords with dynamic contrast. It's got a real creative solo, and then McBride's solos going way up high and tight, and then even more melodic bass ideas. The guy can just do anything on the bass. Amazing stuff. The next tune, Pretty Blue Eyes. Back to Rushan on piano and Goldings on organ. It's a rubato piano opening from Rushan. It picks up into a medium-fast waltz swing, and Goldings adds some rhythmic kind of accompaniment in addition to his bass pedals and takes the first solo. And Rushin has a nice solo here too, and Gibbs accents it all with some tight brush work.
Yeah, Rushin at the beginning of this piece has some classical stylings in it too. I rather enjoyed that as well. So another somebody who's aware of like the classical style of playing. It's nice.
I mean, compared to especially with Kieser's sort of playing, and then with Chick Corea, but Rushin has a nice sort of restrained style. Yeah, but I think a lot of ability.
She's more restrained than the other pianists on this album, but I think she can really cut loose. We've heard it a few times.
The next tune, I guess, would be probably. You would say it as gibberish, but I guess in this case it's gibberish for Gibbs. Yeah, G-I-B-B, the pun there.
Very nice.
This one is kind of a fun start and stop bop melody phrases that have alternating dynamics too. This is Kieser and McBride again. McBride launches into a real speedy solo, and Gibbs has some nice fine cymbal work under that. And then Kieser plays another real energized solo, hitting some bluesy ideas between some rapid key pyrotechnics. Gibbs takes over for a solo with a walking left-hand piano bass line before they return to the melody. Next up is Tango for Terry, and this is back to Chick Corea and Ron Carter. And this has kind of a hypnotic riff intro into a samba tune.
This incidentally is the only piece on the album that's a Chick Corea composition. He actually wrote this for the project.
That's right. So this one is a non-Gibbs composition, and it also gets Ron Carter doing some bass bowing here, which is really cool. Corea carries the melody through its turns, and Gibbs has some really tight snare fills through it all. Corea has a forceful solo, and then Carter gets deep with a solo and adds some intervals while he's going through it. They vamp for a while, and then they let Gibb release some dynamic drum work to return to the riff and some more bass bowing. The beat dissolves to just cymbals, and then Corea takes it out in a lovely fashion with some kind of Spanish-sounding chords to end it all up. This is an awesome album. It pays tribute to his still living father, a giant of jazz that, one of the last remaining bebop era people, and also someone who kept the vibraphone going and pushed it into modern jazz. Terry Gibbs. It's got the best possible trios of pianists and bassists you can imagine today, and I guess from his agent's confirmation, Chick Corea's last recording. This is a must-hear album. Terry Gibbs.
Even if it wasn't Chick Corea's last recording, just the sheer musicianship on this album from everybody is just astonishing. It's so good. Yeah,
you're going to get all these masterful pianists, all with different touches, but all, incredible first-rate players in their own right. And then you've got, the bassists, Christian McBride, Buster Williams, and then when you don't have those, you have Larry Goldings, who just does some awesome organ work and bass pedals too. This one is, and it's all really uplifting music that'll put you in a good mood. So definitely take a listen to this recording.
And people often joke that like Bach's Brandenburg concertos are the best job resume ever in the history of humanity. This album might be the best Father's Day gift ever given.
I think so. Yeah. I believe so, yeah.
It's so good. How could his father not be happy about this?
It's fabulous.
It's all his music. It's played as well as it can possibly be played.
It's not like I'm going to get the best trio to play your music. So I'm going to get 3 of the best trios to play all of your best tunes. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's outrageous.
Absolutely fantastic. This might be one of the jazz albums of the year. Actually, it's just really great.
Yeah. And I mean, and I've talked about all the other players, but I should say that Terry Gibbs' drumming is just spot on.
He really is phenomenal. I didn't really know much about Jerry Gibbs, right? His drumming
Jerry
would be
Gibbs,
phenomenal. Jerry Gibbs,
technically amazing, but with good feel and lots of variety too. You can't go wrong on any of those tracks with the drumming either. So, just check it out. It's a great double album.
Must hear. I would say I'll push on this one. I'd say you have to hear this one.
Now, on to another one of the best modern drummers today. Certainly, we were told so by Michael O'Donnell when we talked to him. Part of the Smoke Sessions crowd, Joe Farnsworth on Smoke Sessions Records with City of Sounds. And
that city is?
Kenny Barron again on piano here.
Yes, we do.
And Peter Washington on bass. And these three have played together a lot. And they're also reunited from Farnsworth's previous album, Time to Swing, which also included Wynton Marsalis in the lineup. And I heard that a couple of years ago. But here we're going to just stick to the piano trio format, no other horns or anything here. And Farnsworth has come up through the ranks playing with McCoy Tyner, Cedar Walton, Harold Mayburn, Hank Jones, and also David Hazeltine, another fine pianist. So here he is as the leader of his trio. And another album where you're going to be amazed by the drumming and also the other musicians.
And especially for me, the piano playing on this album. And I'll say why in a minute.
Oh, okay.
But first of all, City of Sounds. What city might he be referring to here?
New Yorkers.
Yeah, it's got to be New York. It's given away in the title of the first track, really.
Right, which is...
This has a really New York vibe to it, this album.
It does. And this is Kenny Barron original, actually. New York Attitude. Are you talking to me? Yes, we are.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah.
New York Attitude. There it is.
New York Attitude. What are you looking at? We're off to a fast swing with Farnsworth's
You just gave me flashbacks there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, on the subway. This melody has like syncopated sections, and Farnsworth just locks in with Barron's accents instinctively. And there's the Sonny Rollins tune, Erigen.
Right.
And that it sort of quotes that kind of phrase inserted in there, which is really cool. And there's a short section in there where the beat completely changes up in the tune. It's very cool. And Farnsworth just, it doesn't slow him up or change anything. It's just included in there, which is really cool. And Barron gets a real driving solo, and Farnsworth fills in with like these tight snare hits. That's sort of his trademark. He can be doing all these other things, and he just can hit that snare in some unexpected way to fill in. And you wonder, how does he do that? Washington gets a bass solo, and then Barron trades eights with Farnsworth for a bit before Farnsworth takes some more time to show us his snare and tight tom work. So you better not cross him, or else you're going to get some New York attitude back at you for sure. Don't mess with his sticks.
All right.
Next to it is
I got nothing to add to that. I'll have something to say at the end. Let's just say
talking about
that.
Me. Richard Rodgers is the Surrey with a Fringe on top. Jazz standard. It's a classy ballad piano intro by Barron before it starts swinging medium fast with Washington's bass pulse and Farnsworth's brushes. The interplay of Barron's hands in his solo is great. His lines really swing. And, you got to listen to, Farnsworth is the leader here. So, of course, the drums, everything can be heard really clearly. So this is a real study piece for drummers. He switches up from snare brushing to sticks and cymbals for a change of texture, and then move to drive as Baron goes on and on in his solo. Then Baron and Farnsworth trade eights again before returning to the melody, and Washington mixes up what he's doing with one-note beats, intervals, and walking, and seamlessly matches whatever else is happening in the tune. So you just got real mature level of musicianship, guys listening to each other, and incredible technique and class and taste. This is jazz trio at its highest level.
Yeah, and this is like a really traditional kind of cover. This comes from the musical Oklahoma, in fact.
Yeah, one of the greatest.
Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein.
Yep. Next, we got a Farnsworth original. It's nice to have drummers writing original pieces, too. Ojos cariñosos, caring eyes.
Yeah.
It's a slow minor bossa, with Washington digging really low for bass tones, and Baron playing pretty chiming notes. Farnsworth has tight hi-hat and rim hit patterns going here. Everything is crystal clear in the drums, as you'd expect. You just can hear everything that he's doing. Baron leaves lots of space between his phrases here, and Washington fills them kind of instinctively with these little bass nuggets of fills that it's just perfect. And Farnsworth changes up again to swirling cymbals and light hits on the hi-hat sometimes. And so he's a master of textures of percussion, as is Baron on the touch of the piano. So what I mean is, you're not going to get a drummer who just locks into a groove and has great timing. Farnsworth is also, thinking about the textures of the drumming that he's doing, and he's not gonna get into some kind of boring, repetitive thing. He will change up in any given piece and give you, lots of different sounds on the kit, even in the same style, so you can listen to his stylistic variations that are really interesting. Then we go to another Baron original, Bud-like. Bud-like, referring to probably Bud Powell here.
I thought so too.
Yeah. And so we got an alternating interval riff in the bass and left hand of the piano that Baron adds lines over before some chasing phrases that he plays over the chord changes. Farnsworth is ready to switch up from the even beat to driving swing sections. And I love how he drives the cymbal while finding really cool things to do at the snare at the same time. Baron is all over with fresh melodic ideas on the chords, and then Farnsworth takes a solo featuring tom work and tight hi-hat. It's super tight.
Yeah.
Listen to this, yeah. 5, Moonlight in Vermont, a jazz standard by Carl Swissedorf and John Blackburn. It's a beautiful Baron piano intro into a slow ballad tempo. When Farnsworth and Washington join in, Washington gets a huge fat bass tone on some of the low tone. It's just like, it swells out. It sounds great. And Farnsworth paints a picture with his brushes. He's got that real, this brushing is just going to scratch your back while you're listening to this album. Baron shows off his touch. It's great articulation, lilting phrases. He's always leaving some space for you to kind of taste. You play something, you just be like, before he goes on to the next thing. I
wasn't like that, but I did enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, I like that one. And Washington has a solo here too, and he surprisingly plays really melodic for a bass solo, and he gets in some fast lines too, and then some pretty tinkles at the end from Baron. Then we've got the title track, Farnsworth's original City of Sounds. It's got a slow swinging blues tune, basically. And then Baron just plays the blues on this really well. Farnsworth has fun adding press rolls, rim hits, and other fills between his time on the cymbal, which he rides on for the most part. Washington's solo is really melodic again here. Just a cool tune.
This is the title track, in fact. Yeah. So I guess it's the one they had in mind when they named the album.
Cool New York blues.
Yeah, New York.
Track 7, another Farnsworth original. I guess it's kind of funny for a drummer, called No Fills. Maybe because it's so fast. It's a racing tempo tune and now this is going to show you Baron's versatility, because he's really classy and nice touch on jazz standards, but this is a more modern harmony type tune with some open interval chords, and he shows off his chops of modern harmony on this one. Farnsworth gets a lot of cymbal work here. Washington walks the fast tempos on the bass really tightly, and then Farnsworth's going to mix up over his extended solo here all over the kit. He's got real impressive snare work, rhythm shifts, and you don't get bored in his drum solos like you might in some other drummers. He'll lull you into some kind of a zombified beat thing. No, he's got too many tricks and skills to keep things going on. And interesting, at the end, rather than repeating the melody, they end it more quietly and minimized, with Washington kind of hypnotizing you with some awesome bass riffs as things go out. So a nice classy approach here.
Somebody hit me. I've been hypnotized.
Hypnotized, yeah. Hit me. And we end up with, something we heard hinted at by Goldings in the previous album, but Softly as in a Morning Sunrise, Romberg and Hammerstein's classic tune. This one gets off to a chugging medium swing here. Really tight brushwork from Farnsworth and kind of spring-loaded swinging from Baron. It's kind of that swinging bounce, that only really masterful players can get in their touch. And Washington gives his own bass boost. Farnsworth switches up to ride cymbal as Baron solos, and Baron gets a lot of time to pick apart and reassemble the harmony in this tune. He's got a real nice harmonic sense in his soloing. Washington has a bass solo. It's got some, again, nice melodic ideas. And Farnsworth keeps it super tight in the background with the brushes. And then Baron and Farnsworth trade eights for a while. In Farnsworth soloing, the panned cymbals give a nice touch. You'll hear it in the left and the right in your speakers or headphones. And when they come back to the melody, Baron has some fun with reharmonizing the melody and then jamming out a bit over the tight hi-hat with some mambo hints as it fades out. So
I thought this kind of, before you sum up, I just want to say this kind of reminded me, the sound, the rhythm that they set at the beginning of this reminded me of the tune 42nd Street from that 1980 musical by Harry Warren. I wrote down.
Oh, okay.
He had written a lot of it kind of sounded like something out of the 1940s.
Right.
And it turned out that Harry Warren, I didn't know much about him. He did a lot of film scores in the 30s and 40s, the Busby Berkeley movies and stuff like that. It had that kind of vibe to it, and that really sucked me in. I was like, I'd never heard this tune, Softly as in a Morning Sunrise. I heard it performed many ways, but not like this before. I thought it was kind of appealing. Yeah.
Yeah, really appealing. And so overall, I mean, I don't know what can say about the vibe of this. Is just classy. I mean, this is, just straight ahead modern jazz, done with complete class. One of the best straight ahead drummers out there today. The program is good. It's a mix of originals, a couple of standards, all done creatively with players who are locked in together and having a lot of fun. I mean, it just doesn't get any better than this in jazz trio format.
Except it did in the Jerry Gibbs album.
Yeah.
But although this is a different thing. Okay.
It's a different thing, yeah.
It really is. And I think at this point, I want to mention that having the drummer as a leader seems to really have a real effect on the pianist, because the pianist isn't having to make all the decisions he would when he's the leader. And Baron, in this case, just sounds... He's very different here than he is on the Jerry Gibbs album. Mm-hmm. He's all New York class and glitter, and it's just fantastic. I just loved hearing this all the way through. I was like, oh, is this how he plays? It's one way he plays. Yeah. I was really listening to him throughout, being like more enamored of the piano and bass, my two instruments, myself. So, I just this album just sounds New York to me. If you think of the opening of Saturday Night Live, all that like high energy jazz electricity. You get that a lot on this record, except no saxophones, of course.
Yeah, I think, Baron has that like supreme touch and standard interpretation side of him, but he also, I think he is, fully comfortable also with modern, sort of more open and adventurous harmonization, which we get a hint of here too. And he can take the lead, as I said, listening to him in that Stan Getz People Time recording where there's no other rhythm section, it's just him. Or he can, sync to whatever drummer or rhythm section. I think he's a real complete player with a huge palette of capabilities, but his sense of touch. He's a composer
as well. He's got everything.
He writes good tunes too. But the way his sense of touch is just wonderful. So, this is a great album. You're going to enjoy it. Put you in a New York state of mind. And you say, are you looking at me? Only you can answer that. Yeah.
What are you looking at?
What are you looking at? And then another.
I'm trying to think of more of those before we go on, but I can't. Anyway.
I can't give any more New Yorkisms. It's been too long. And we're gonna.
It's just as well, really.
Yeah, it's probably just as well.
It's probably a good thing that we're forgetting.
Come to fisticuffs before the end of the podcast here. Yeah. We're gonna end up with the debut leader recording of an up and coming drummer, Jonathan Blake, on Blue Note, with a really cohesive effort for a debut recording as a leader called Homeward Bound.
What a debut it is. Homeward Bound, it's called,
Yeah. And so we've got drummer, composer, and band leader Jonathan Blake here, and he's up and coming in his career. His quintet is called Pentad, and it includes Emmanuel Wilkins on alto sax, who we heard back in episode 25 with Orrin Evans, vibraphonist, which I think sort of gives that unique touch on this instrumentation here. Joel Ross, keyboardist David Vareas, who we heard with Andrus Cyril just a few weeks ago, episode 30, and the bassist is Desron Douglas. He's kind of a very modern drum player here. He's collaborated with Pharoah Sanders, Ravi Coltrane, Tom Harrell, Vashik Cohen, Donnie McCleeson, Jaleel Shaw, Chris Potter, Maria Schneider, Alex Sipiagin, and many, many others. And he can play in various contexts here, but on here, where he's the leader, he gets a really nice cohesive theme on here. And what you notice, in contrast to the two previous drummers, Gibbs and Farnsworth, who are really tight, sort of swinging precision masters, I think Blake's style is sort of a more loose kind of free-form style, because he has, not that he doesn't have he has a great sense of rhythm that allows him to sort of play around the beat more and let things happen as he sort of drives from the angles through things. So it's a different style of modern drumming, and so it creates a interesting kind of thing going here. We also heard him, I should mention, on Lonnie Smith's Breathe, who, Lonnie Smith passed away, and we looked at his final album.
Which one? The one with, what's his name? Iggy Pop on it? That one? That album?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He was playing on that one, yeah. Right. And he also played with Kenny Barron a few years ago, 2018, Concentric Circles. And so,
okay. I remember that record.
Yeah, and I guess he's been playing with Kenny Barron for more than a decade, 10 or 15 years or so. So he's been in top jazz circles, and so here he is out on his own as a debut as a leader, and it's a fine effort with a nice overall kind of arc and feeling to it. We're going to begin with one of his original compositions. In the beginning was the drum. It's just a short free-form intro on drums, mainly on toms and snare. It's very short, but it leads into the title track, Homeward Bound, parentheses for Anna Grace. This is starting out with an almost ostinato bass line. There's a little variation in it, but it's pretty repetitive. But if you count it out, you'll realize it's in 5/4 time, which makes it kind of interesting. The pianos and piano and vibes create a dreamy chord mix, and Wilkins on sax floats a few long notes before the melody kicks in. It has some interesting weaves to the melody and harmonic choices that the melody follows. Before you think it's too pretty, it'll change up a bit. Blake adds some real tasty fills here, and the vibes and sax trade solo phrases, and then Virius has an undulating kind of piano solo, and when we go through a little bit more, the piano and bass repeat a hypnotic riff for Blake to solo over. So we're going home in that direction from the start. Track 3, another Blake original, Rivers and Parks. Here, Royce switches to a Rhodes piano, gives us another tone color in the ensemble here. And so the Rhodes and then vibes play the melody, which gets joined by the sax. Ross takes a nice vibe solo, and then Blake pushes the more free beat into a kind of driving swing with the cymbal. Wilkins solos next. He gets some interesting harmonic ideas, and then Virius takes a solo on the Rhodes piano, and then Douglas gets a bass solo as well on this tune. And Blake is always real busy with lots of ideas backing the solo, but you get a sense of his loose style here. He plays around the beat a lot with lots of different kinds of attacks. 4 is original by the bassist Desron Douglas called Shakin' the Biscuits. I wonder what that's referring to.
Yeah.
I like it when they shake the biscuits, though. The sax and drums start
at least
kind
on
of
this track, right?
Freeform, hinting at bluesy thoughts, and there's some kind of panning, phaser-like Rhodes chords there. The bass joins with an ostinato line, and then the tune takes a funky, bluesy groove and shape. Ross comes in on vibes, and Virius with some synth lines here, too. And then Wilkins turns to squawks and honks in his solos, and things spiral out a little bit into crazy land, but they finish up funky, so all is good. Then we have a rather sweet, contrasting tune, Abiyoyo, which is a South African traditional melody. Blake introduces a slow drum beat with toms. Virius has the melody on piano, and at the same time, the bass adds a little pulse to it. It sounds like Ross hits some muted, like xylophone tones in here, too. It doesn't sound like vibes. It could be if they're extremely muted, or some other kind of pitched, sharp glockenspiel or something. The sax joins in on the melody, and then the vibes on some very sparse tones. He really holds back there. And then Blake taps out soft textures on the kit. This is a soft and rather lullaby-like tune. It's very pretty, but it fades out over repeated piano and bass notes. So a little kind of lullaby type thing in the middle. Back to another Blake original. Next, On the Break, where Blake introduces a real neat beat here. Cool bass drum kick. The piano and bass join in on this repeating riff. You're just getting into it, and it's gone. It's only like a little more than a minute. So it's probably just a groove or something they worked up, and they thought, well, that sounds cool. Let's throw it in there. 7, Triple L or LLL, another break Blake original. I don't know what it refers to, but here Blake mixes it up on the drum intro before the melody is introduced on both the sax and vibes, which is an appealing tonal combination. It's got a lot of rhythmic drive in the syncopated piano chords and the bass accompaniment, along with Blake's cymbal work. Voyage is up for a solo first. He's got some free-flowing lines here, along with some hard-driving syncopated chords. And Ross really lets the mallets fly on his vibes solo here, too. And then if you listen during the vibe solo, the interaction between Blake and Douglas gets some like new kind of groove patterns happening under the solo. So there's sort of like, while they're driving a solo, they're having this new interaction under that. So I thought the interplay on this tune is really cool. And so we've got mostly these original tunes with one African traditional, and we come out with something unexpected, but anyone who grew up in the 80s will remember Joe Jackson, and got a really unique and cool interpretation of one of his best tunes, Steppin' Out. So the tune starts out, you wouldn't recognize it at all because it's a cool altered harmony piano intro here, and then it's kind of a rhythmic ostinato pattern on the piano that's joined by the bass. And then finally, you'll hear that familiar melody, which just played pretty much straight up in the piano right hand. They repeat it again, and then sax and vibes join in. And we're stepping out. Then you'll get it on there. And so it's a nice build-up from obscure to the familiar. Wilkins takes the first solo, and he really explores outside of the chords. Then Voyage alters the harmonies, and underneath all that, Blake keeps mixing up with an infectious driving beat. Wilkins hits on a riff in that, and then he completely dismantles and explodes out of it. He really rips these angsty notes until they suddenly subside back into a calmed melody restatement, and that gets stuck into a riff without resolving. That gives Blake some time to show off some impressive subdivided and really varied rhythmic ideas in his drum solo. And then they finally resolve all that tension and go for one more round of the melody to fade it out. So this album, it's a nice flow of tunes, some interesting arrangements, instrumentations. I really thought that the addition of vibes to his group with Ross's mallet work just gives that extra space to the atmosphere. And in addition to that, Voyage adding the Rhodes in there gives that spatial quality too. So you've got this really nice kind of sound envelope for these tunes that wraps around you. The tune section and the sequencing also take you on this journey home. It's kind of nice. So maybe it gives you this kind of homeward bound feeling after all. Blake's got a great sense of time, and that allows him to play loosely and around the beat in a real modern style that's got a lot of creativity, but he still holds everything together, and he can, switch to being really driving when he wants to. So I thought it's a really satisfying listen and a fine debut as a drum leader with a cool concept of sound. So another one definitely worth checking out.
Absolutely. You had three great jazz picks this week. I especially loved that he included Steppin' Out at the end. I just love that tune. Yeah, and all those Joe Jackson tunes. When I heard this tune, I actually looked him up. He's still recording and performing, but I don't know, I guess you could hear his music on Deezer if we wanted to, his recent music, but I kind of lost track of him in the 90s. I should really check out what he's been doing. This album, another thing I want to say about this album is it has the vibes on it. And after we were exposed to the steroidal ability of Simone Muglia a few weeks back. Yeah. This was really just reassuring that, you know, it's vibe playing. It's more laid back. There's a lot of space on
atmospheric,
it. It's atmospheric. I really enjoyed hearing him, and it's very present as well. It comes out of the speakers in this real kind of glimmer to it.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it. I don't want to put down Simone Muglia's playing at all. I really enjoyed it, but I just thought it was like, whoa, it was really tiring. I still listen to the album a lot, though, when I'm kind of, you know,
well, it's nice
around
because,
town.
you know, we all have really good concepts of the variety that you can, you know, have individually, like with trumpet or saxophone, but maybe we have a kind of pattern image of the vibes, but, you know, we listen to more vibe players, we can, you know, see that, yeah, you can do a lot with that instrument as well. It's just we don't hear it enough. But I do have another vibraphone recording on the list.
Cool!
So
I can't wait. I really do like the vibes a lot. Yeah. I know my dad liked the vibes a lot when he was younger. Yeah. He used to listen to Lionel Hampton and Cal Tjader a lot.
Yeah, Cal Tjader.
Yeah, he liked cool jazz.
I think it might be time to break out.
I hope my dad listens to these records. I think you can get him back into jazz. I don't know.
You know, the instruments not recorded often enough sort of combination. That might be a good thing to bring up, you know.
Yeah.
We get lots of sax and trumpet, but we don't get enough vibes and other instruments, so.
Right. I want to hear more vibes anyway. I used to look through my dad's record. He had all these like cool jazz like records. He liked jazz a lot, but he never listened to jazz except for Frank Sinatra when I was a kid. I think my mom changed him. I think he was much cooler before he got married.
Oh no. Hate when that happens, yeah.
That was warning number 1 for me.
Oh.
I myself never married, so there you go.
There's still time.
There is, but this record collection is staying. Let's just make sure we understand that right away.
I guess I lucked out on that because I guess I've been married for longer than I haven't, and
good for you.
The missus, she puts up with my musical indulgences, and
she's very good. She's
a good one. Yeah, I got lucky with that.
Yeah, there you go. Gotta have that. Gotta have someone who loves music anyway.
Yeah. Otherwise, you know, if it's gonna be
for us anyway.
I told her, you know, if it's gonna be Luxman and Dolly or the wife, which one stays? Well, you know, I don't know. There's a few
Dolly
billion.
Would be the speakers, not the painter.
There's a few billion wife possibilities out there, but there's not so many brands of amps and speakers. So, you know, what are you gonna do? Are you looking at me?
Are you looking at me? I actually talked to this woman who was complaining that her husband bought a new stereo, and she came to me and thought I would be a good person to complain to about that.
How wrong of a...
I had to restrain myself from defending her husband for buying the new stereo.
Oh, wow.
Because it didn't fit in with the living room or something. I don't know.
Oh, I guess they just needed a new house.
Just need a new house. That's all. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
but she was really mad about that. I was like, I think I made the right decision staying single.
In detail in the future.
There's not much detail to it, really. So she just kind of decided I was going to be her earpiece, and I just.
Are they still married?
I was. Let's just say I was not sympathetic to her suffering.
I'm trying to think if I've talked to any guy who who told me that he got a new wife because she didn't agree with his stereos. I don't know, maybe not, but
you know, there's a comedian, Bridget Fedesi, and I sometimes watch her show on YouTube, and she's recently married, and she was talking about her husband who had, I don't know if he bought a stereo or something, but she was saying to her other female kind of like co-conspirators, they love wires. Something about guys. It's not the wires we love. We love the high fidelity. I don't know. If it was wireless, it'd be even better. I don't know. But it's really funny to me that she was kind of fascinated by that. We really are different, men and women, aren't we? I don't know. As far as stereo equipment goes, maybe not music, but stereo equipment, definitely.
Yeah, I guess there's all different focuses and interpretation. You know what? But in all that, what matters is the music.
Right.
And what we want to feature, whether you listen hi-fi lo-fi, no-fi, or however you listen to. We want the music to be mature and to matter. And I think this week it really did, with some real variety and some
great music, some great recordings too. All of it was really good.
A variety of classical music from the old to the ultra modern, and some of the best drummers out there today in traditional swing driving music, right up to kind of loose and modern interpretations. And that's what we're all here for, music for the mature mind on Adult Music. We scour the best new releases and listen to them as much as possible to describe them in detail, to save you time with picking great new things to listen to every week. And so do check out all of the links to the recordings or hit up the playlist on Deezer. This one's been episode 37 of Adult Music. We'll be back next week with episode 38. Again, please do like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on. If you want to contact us, the email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. And what do you think, Mike? Any hints for next week?
Well, yes, as far as classical goes?
Yeah.
I think I'm going to stick to my pattern of Baroque, something in the middle, and then a contemporary composer.
Okay.
I'll give you that.
I don't know. I have a bunch of trombone recordings, but I don't know if they're all interesting enough. So what I might do is make it those sort of instruments that we don't hear enough of, including vibes, trombone, and maybe something else.
That could be cool.
Yeah. You know, because you can play jazz on all kinds of instruments. It doesn't have to be saxophone and trumpet.
I think I've got composers we don't hear enough of, so maybe we can have a theme there.
Yeah. Anyway, this has been a dive into the unknown, and now it's known on episode 37. You've known
I guess that's our title, huh?
I guess that'll be it. Yeah. See what people think of that. Anyway, we'll be back next week again with episode 38 with some classical and jazz releases. And so have a good week of listening. Check out the playlists, and we'll see you again next time.